This time we will talk about Lion, a guy who died on Earth from severe burnout but was given a second chance. The new life turned out to be not so bad. He was reborn in the magical world as the son of a powerful duke from the kingdom of Lionheart. From the very beginning, the path of a knight was prepared for him. Lion fell into the hands of the legendary mentor, the holy knight Sir Gordic. It was this meeting that changed everything. Years of intense training, daily work, not a single step back, all for one purpose: to receive the blessings of the goddess. This was the only way to become a holy knight. Lion persistently gained fame, helped people, and waited for the goddess to finally appear. This happened when he turned 20. She gave him a task that would prove his faith and honor. And he did it. Lion became a holy knight, but the real fight was just beginning. He destroyed the monsters one by one. It was in this endless chaos that I finally felt alive. When the old king died in battle, the goddess made a choice. And this choice fell on Lion. He accepted the sacred lion's heart and swore to guard the Holy Grail. From now on, he was king and knight in one person. But peace never came. The wars did not stop. Demons, monsters, darkness, all this haunted the world. Lion did everything he could, but even his strength could not save the world from decline. He fought to the end, even though he knew that evil was not so easy to end. Despite everything, he did not lose faith, and the goddess promised to always be there. 300 years have passed. Finally, Lion destroyed the last demon. But something was wrong. Strangers were simply standing in front of him. It seemed to him that they were completely out of this world. I'll hint that these are people from the protagonist's past life. Don't forget he's an Earthling just like you and me. He introduced himself in a rather formal manner. And only then did it become clear that this was the very day our hero met the Earthlings. Exactly 300 years have passed. Before we continue, we need to explain a little about what was actually happening on Earth. Unlike the world of Lion, which had long been mired in wars with demons, everything looked different here. 30 years ago, portals opened up all over the world, a direct door to other realities, from which monsters and demons began to crawl. Over time, it became clear. Each gate had its own theme and purpose, but they all led to worlds that were either already dead or just falling apart. If these portals were left unattended, monsters would leak onto Earth, and that's where the survivors came from. And at the same time, he not only survived but returned with such strength that it seemed that the gods themselves had blessed them. Lion was one of these returnees. And now it's time to get to know those who have just met our hero. Kim is the head of the Korean Demon Hunters Association. Hari is his right hand. They, like hundreds of other hunters around the world, were busy clearing portals. But what they found did not fit into standard protocols. Lion was found in the anomalous Black Gate, the most dangerous level. Inside lurked a demon so powerful that most warriors would not even dream of defeating it. But our hero just showed up and took down this monster with one blow. After that, there was no doubt left. He had to be recruited. Such a fighter could change everything. But before thinking about contracts, Kim and Hari faced another challenge: cultural differences. Hari, by the way, looked at Lion with hope. She sincerely believed that this knight from another world was able to understand them better than they themselves. Thus began the new adventures of Lion, the king who returned from the dead world, the chosen one of the gods, and the enemy of all evil. The hero who destroyed millions of demons has set foot on Earth again. And the first thing that flashed through his mind was that this planet had lost faith. Hari was tasked with establishing contact with the mysterious king, but everything didn't go according to plan. Lion turned out to be not just a foreigner. He was the embodiment of ancient honor and chivalric customs. He was outraged by modern manners, which seemed inappropriate to him. And yes, you can start laughing now. King is king everywhere. Above all, Lion wanted to learn more about this world. He was aware that demons, that insatiable evil, had also appeared here. Hari set out on her mission. The main thing was to convince the survivor to join the Hunters Association. She promised that from now on, the Korean government would take good care of him. However, as is often the case, the king had one but. To live in this world, he must have the commitment to go to the battlefield. If Lion is a noble knight, then he must fight. However, the king cannot fight under the banner of another kingdom. Hari had no choice but to agree. Life on Earth was rich. Immediately after Lion's arrival, a new portal opened, near the fields and one of the largest grain warehouses in the country. You need to act immediately because product production may be suspended. Besides, there was a Phoenix Guild near this area, and these bastards definitely had their own plans. Lion heard everything perfectly, and now understood the seriousness of the situation. If the gate is breached, the land will be polluted, and there will be no harvest either. It seems that people cannot do without Lion's help. In this world, money and power really ruled, and guilds often liked to profit from dangerous situations. One of these was the Phoenix Guild. These cunning guys received a huge income from the gate and also refused to pay taxes. And this time, they didn't want to close the portal at all, even though too much time had passed, and the demons could soon break out. The king was not going to listen to these fools. He needed a clear explanation of the situation. As a result, the protagonist ordered to gather all his forces, because the next day the king would speak in person. First, a ritual had to be performed to cleanse the land. All conditions for this were met, and Lion called upon the mother of the fertile earth. Real magic began to happen, astonishing all earthlings. But the protagonist knew that the goddess Demira had set foot on earth. Lion stood in the middle of the field where the goddess Demira had recently appeared. He spoke about the critical situation. Earthlings not only suffer from demon attacks, but are also deprived of true divinity. The goddess asked her faithful knight what he planned to do. Lion replied that he intended to teach the earthlings and lead them on the righteous path until a new pantheon was built on this earth. Demira happily agreed to help her champion, wanting everything in the new land to become his support. Suddenly, a pillar of light pierced the field, and Lion declared that this world would move with the deity. The hunters were shocked to watch this scene. However, the Phoenix Guild attempted to manipulate the situation by claiming that the crops had been poisoned. Lion was indignant because the harvest had been blessed by a deity. He ordered not to defile the goddess, warning that ignorance is forgiven only once. It was decided to check the rice crops, and it turned out that every stalk was of a rare level, and therefore it had a sky-high price. Everyone was pleased with this event. The goddess announced that her role was complete, and Lion expressed his boundless gratitude to Mother Earth. She scolded her knight so that he would never be hungry. Now that the first part of the job was done, it was possible to enter the gate. Meanwhile, the Phoenix Guild realized that their plans could be ruined. If it weren't for Lion, politicians would have listened to the guild's protest and granted their request. But now we will have to use other methods. The head of the Phoenix Guild believed that this survivor, although connected to the gods, was nothing in a real battle. In that case, the freaks from the Hunters Association will lose, because what awaits them inside the gate? To explain everything very briefly, the gate will close if the task is completed and the boss is defeated. In this case, monsters will not be able to go outside and pollute the land and kill people. Interestingly, Lion liked one-on-one battles with strong monsters. But the hunters from the association were shaking with fear. Even though the dungeons had been cleared before, there were an abnormally large number of monsters there, both living and dead. Hari explained this phenomenon by saying that monsters would respawn as long as their boss was alive, so it could be very difficult for their small group. Lion was just going to win as quickly as possible. However, the boss was not so simple a rider of death on a dead horse. The fighters of the association were very afraid, because there were so many opponents and they were all approaching at the same time. But no one was going to give up. Everyone fought as best they could because the lives of others depended on it. I understand that you are not interested in all the details of such a large-scale battle, so let's move on to the moment when everything changed. Hari tried to ask Lion to help. However, the king had no intention of participating in such a small battle. The protagonist told people to look for ways to strengthen their own power and honor. Hari decided not to waste any time. She rushed into battle with the boss. However, the creature turned out to be too cunning and strong. Her blow was easily deflected by Hari. However, the girl was just beginning to show her own talents. She surrounded the creature with fire to keep other monsters away, and only the girl wanted to deal a fatal blow. Someone unexpectedly intervened in the fight. His Majesty was impressed by the monster's skills, and now he considered him a great knight. That's why he was going to end this battle with a noble duel between two knights. And this crazy offer for the demon worked. Hari immediately warned about a critical aspect of this dungeon. The demon Durkan will remain immortal until his head is cut off. However, Lion ignored these rules. For him, the main thing was to destroy the boss. He officially challenged his opponent to a duel, and the fight began. The demon struck a powerful blow, but Lion stopped him with one hand. Duran's first failed attempt at victory. Lion continued to block his opponent's attacks, and with this he shocked the hunters who were watching the fight. It became obvious what incredible power the survivor possessed. During the battle, the demon Durkan felt a long-forgotten feeling of being treated like a true knight. Lion's figure was impressive, his poise, his calm reminiscent of a veteran of numerous wars, and also burning eyes full of the desire for honor and glory. This man embodied the ideals that all warriors strive for. The demon wanted to cross swords with this stranger again and again. Lion noticed how Duran's fencing had become more refined and varied. It was as if memories from his life had returned to the demon. In response, Duran made an unexpected decision. He offered his crown to Lion. The protagonist felt joy that the demon had regained his honor and promised to pray for him. Having summoned the true light, Lion ended the duel. Even the devil acknowledged the glory of Leon Lionheart. Thus ended the protagonist's first battle on Earth. However, something bothered Lion. The rewards left behind by the monster from the gate. One of these things was worrying, and the protagonist decided to destroy the magic stone. To avoid possible problems in the future, we will learn about this later. During the 4 days after Lion's return to Earth, many events occurred. At first, there were difficulties with taxes. The king had never dealt with finances, and this became a source of some misunderstandings. His stubbornness only complicated the situation. At the same time, new believers were being accepted so that a new deity could appear on this Earth. Another important task was to find suitable housing for the protagonist. Lion demanded a room with a luxurious bed, servants, and works of art for constant enjoyment. This Lion was truly an extraordinary person. It seems that all kings were like that before. However, even this issue was resolved, as Harry became his personal assistant. Simply put, she fulfilled all the whims of the survivor. His new home was located next to the Hunters Association. By the way, all financial matters were covered by the association, so they could use the king for their own purposes. That's why the protagonist's move to a new house was a big secret. However, a mysterious figure was already waiting for Harry and Lion at the entrance. It turned out that he was the director of one of the largest brands, Dujan. It seems that this meeting was not a coincidence. You probably remember the Blessed Field, where healing rice grows that even cures diseases. The director of the trading company was happy to meet the survivor. That was all too obvious. However, Lion was not going to shake hands with some merchant there. This reaction of the protagonist only helped Harry get out of this mess. The king, interestingly, understood perfectly well why the merchant had come to them. This man was clearly pursuing profit, and it is clear that it is all because of the rice in the Honam Valley that was blessed by the deity. Information about this has already been spread across all social networks. The company's director, Dujan, was beside himself with anger at the survivor. These aliens from other worlds consider the world they lived in to be the best and treat other people with contempt. The company director decided to hit our hero with a culture shock. Upon returning to Earth, Lion set 3 main goals for himself. The first was to spread the faith. Although many gods existed on the planet, true holy power was lacking. Humanity needed faith in God and the spread of His mercy. The second is the search for new knights of the Holy Grail. Unfortunately, there was no combat unit in this world that used holy powers. Lion, as the guardian of the Holy Grail, was a demigod, while the other knights were living saints, standing just below the king in the hierarchy. The third is the eradication of evil on Earth. Lion believed that he could succeed only by completing this task. Soon, the protagonist was scheduled to meet with the director of a trading company. This time, the man had prepared a gift, a luxurious item that, in his opinion, would impress even a savage. Lion decided to accept the gift only out of kindness, but he ordered Harry to open the box. Inside was a high-class weapon made by the Dujan Guild. However, Lion immediately rejected it, stating that he could not use weapons of such poor quality. He explained that it was impossible to create good weapons without divine blessing. This made the merchant look dubious in the eyes of the king. Despite this, Lion decided to try out the gift. Hari, fascinated by the products of the Dujan Guild, was confident in her abilities even against the king. However, as soon as she swung, her sword shattered like glass. This much-advertised sword did not even leave a trace of fire on the king's weapon. This demonstrated the true value of human weapons. Lion was even a little upset, and he made an interesting decision. The king ordered the merchant to explain the reason for his arrival in a few minutes. It seems the hero was quite impatient. It turned out to be simple. The company wanted to obtain a patent for rice grains. Lion immediately understood the situation, and his anger was incredible. After all, it was blasphemy. These words about a patent and money in exchange for grains of rice were a direct insult to the deity. The king explained that this foolish man had discovered his sin himself. The harvest grew in the blessed land, and was a gift to the Christians so they could cultivate the fields. This is something that money cannot buy. Tribute to the deity can only be given through gratitude and faith. This ended the negotiations. Now a new task awaited the protagonist. More precisely, he ordered Harry to prepare something. The girl was naively happy that the survivor himself wanted to undergo a test of strength. But the protagonist didn't understand what she was talking about. It turned out that Lion wanted to find a few useful warriors and was going to test them. That's how the king ended up in the Hunters Association. There were a lot of people in the main office. Everyone wanted to pass the test to increase their rank. After all, the stronger you become, the more money you can earn. One of these was a simple guy named Tesso. He has been stuck at rank D for 10 years. No matter how much effort and diligence he put in, he couldn't move forward. But the guy wasn't going to give up. His conversation with the elder was interrupted by a strange event. Lion attracted the attention of all the warriors. The protagonist looked like a person of royal blood, and Lion met one of the warriors' eyes. Will this be a fateful meeting? But we'll learn about that a little later. Meanwhile, Lion went on a test drive. He was just going to observe, which surprised the association's employees. Typically, all cleared gates are closed and cleaned. But some leave it for profit. One such place was the Soul Station portal. The same guy who was going to improve his qualifications ended up there. Imagine his surprise when he saw the protagonist. Now the poor boy was worried whether everything would be okay in this test. In addition to Tesso, there were 2 other newcomers at the test. This caused the boy some concern because of possible difficulties in battle. Also in the group was an elderly man with limited experience. The last participant was Lion, who immediately announced that he would not participate in the fight. Well, of course, that's the nature of the royal person. In this challenge, the team needs to hunt 50 kobolds, and stronger monsters may appear on the battlefield. In addition, an association employee will supervise the group at all times, and in a critical situation it may even intervene. Tesso was only worried about one thing, whether everything would be okay during this test. The guy was already the leader and suggested hunting in the forest. He had a great idea, to attack the kobolds living in the cave. He had a lot of experience, so the plan was developed quickly. However, this idyll quickly ended. There were kobolds ahead. These monsters were moderately strong but tenacious freaks. The group skillfully defended and attacked with arrows. The monsters were quickly killed and we could breathe a sigh of relief. Tesso praised everyone because they made a good team. However, something was bothering him. Why didn't that strange foreigner, our protagonist, join the fight? However, an association employee reassured that inaction would also be taken into account. The team calmed down a bit and moved on. Well, everything is going according to plan now. A fire had to be lit around the cave. This way the monsters will run out in panic and become easy prey. The protagonist intervened. It seemed that Lion didn't like this decision very much and wanted to know more. Tesso, who used this method 3 times, was confident in his idea. No one wanted to listen to Lion's mumbling about superficial experiences. The fire was blazing and everyone was preparing to attack. The team worked well together. The arrows flew straight at the kobolds, and Tesso was proud that his plan had worked. But suddenly a roar was heard from the forest. The boss of this dungeon came out to them. I wonder if they will be able to handle such an opponent. The 2 young men instantly understood the situation and rushed at the Knoll captain, the boss of the dungeon. Although one of them was a rookie, there was still hope for his strength. Tesso himself definitely wouldn't be able to handle a C-rank monster. The situation was truly critical. The boss's attacks were too powerful for a beginner. The fate of the battle was in the hands of Tesso, who desperately threw himself under the monster's attack. His shield could barely withstand such force, but now it was time for the next attack. Tesso wasn't sure if he could block her. At this point, Lion intervened. He was interested in Tesso, and he suggested that the guy try again. But the young man was stunned to see how the stranger stopped the boss's attack with just his fingers. The king ordered to raise the shield and look the monster straight in the eye. If the young man was able to block a blow once, why not do it again? However, Tesso shouted that everyone was in mortal danger. Lion became angry because his teachings were ignored. Tesso understood that for the sake of survival, you have to do everything. But suddenly the creature switched to Lion. The Night King understood the Knoll captain with just one look. Now the battle belonged only to Tesso. Meanwhile, the king gave the young man instructions. How to hold the shield correctly, and how to choose the moment to strike. Lion wanted this guy to reach his full potential because he was definitely capable of more. Tesso understood perfectly well that he had no unique skills. Hearing words of support will not make talent appear, but self-belief will soar to the skies. Tesso knew he would be able to block the blow this time, and so it happened. The guy relaxed early and began to rejoice. The Knoll captain knocked out the fighter with one blow. After that, the king went to meet with the head of the Hunters Association. This man successfully concealed his identity, observing the battle under the guise of an ordinary worker. He was pleased that the king had dealt with the dungeon boss like a toy. That's why he was given an important task, to clear out the dungeon, which they had been unable to deal with for a year. He needs to take or destroy the portal's trophy, the Stone of Wisdom, which is guarded by a tank destroyer. The KP Guild arrived to clear the gate. Don't pay attention to the names. Just watch the events closely. These gates opened the way to the world of the future. So the guild had to develop a strategy against the cyberpunk monsters. And let's put it this way. It's not an easy task, artificial intelligence, super powerful weapons and all that. The warriors chose a large building as their base. However, even from its height, not a single enemy could be detected. The city seemed deserted, which sowed fear among the soldiers. The squad captain tried to raise the fighting spirit of his comrades. After all, they had important matters to attend to, as there was not enough information about the tank destroyer. It was necessary to conduct high-quality reconnaissance. Before the captain could finish his speech, his body was cut in half. The situation became critical. It seemed that the opponent was a sniper. This tank destroyer's attacks were too powerful, and the only adequate solution for the team was to retreat. One of the hunters ordered the exit to be checked for safety. As the girl ran out of the building, she was startled by a strange premonition, such an unfamiliar and insidious tickle near her neck. Her head rolled to the floor. The city was covered in a deadly web. The warriors tried to cut the iron web with their swords. It's hard to believe that all of this was created by just one opponent. The tank destroyer continued to attack. The strength and intelligence of this monster were superhuman. His name is Yapi. It was created to fight in critical conditions, with the sole purpose of protecting this city. However, all this is just one of the failed attempts to clean up this portal. A new raid on this cyberpunk gate will begin soon. This time, one of the best guilds in Korea and members of the Wizard's Tower will participate. And also members of the Hunters Association, Hari and Lion. Hari was most worried. The girl did not want His Majesty to enter the battle. But on the other hand, this is the only way he can gain fame and recognition. Lion agreed with this. If the king does not participate in the battle, it means that the task is not so serious. The protagonist decided to delve into philosophy. His question to Hari was simple. What is the role of the king? The logical answer is to rule. However, anyone else can rule as well. Hari immediately began to think about it and realized that Lion only intervened when no one else could handle it. So the title of King Lionheart symbolizes the last hope. If he enters the battle, it could be a shame for the knights. But it shows how serious the situation is. The protagonist understood perfectly well that these people were not his knights. However, this time they had quite strong warriors with them. However, even they do not know what real war is. The warriors, meanwhile, decided to attack because they learned about certain patterns of this monster. But do they know how to behave flexibly depending on the situation? After all, this creature, Yacht Spinner, was a natural-born fighter. The tank destroyer continued to carry out its last order, to defend the city. He destroyed absolutely everyone who could pose a threat. The Golden Lion Guild captain began his attack. His blows were able to damage the monster. The force of the other fighters' fire immobilized Yapi, and magic became the deciding factor. The monster suffered significant damage, but continued to analyze the situation. The system even identified the main target of the sweep. However, now Yapi rushed away from the scene. Even while moving, he continued to fire at the guests, and the warriors cunningly hid under the magic dome. Of course, staying in one place for too long was too dangerous. As soon as the barrier disappeared, everyone was ordered to flee. However, this brilliant plan failed. Everything around was entwined with a steel web. It seemed the warriors were doomed. The Yacht Spinner was going to destroy them with an electric discharge. But suddenly a beautiful horse galloped towards them, and our protagonist was riding it. The king intervened and gave the monster the opportunity to participate in a duel. Yapi instantly activated combat protocols preparing to attack Lion. However, the king did not retreat. He resolutely rushed forward, with the dignity and calm that only true rulers possess. His voice sounded like thunder. The king does not fall from a cowardly long-range weapon. At this moment, two incredible forces clashed in an epic duel. However, something went wrong for Yapi. Its powerful artificial intelligence, capable of analyzing thousands of scenarios in an instant, suddenly stopped. The phenomenon unfolding before his optical sensors defied any logic. Before the battle, the system evaluated Lion's weapons, speed, and other characteristics, assigning him a threat level of 0. This meant that the opponent posed no danger. However, reality refuted these calculations. The protagonist used an incredible phenomenon, a sacred law of protection against arrows that guaranteed that you would definitely get through once. Thanks to this, the Yappy bullets could not even touch the king. After such a collision, the tank destroyer was in critical condition. But he overestimated Lion as the highest threat. He decided to retreat from the battlefield to recover and rebuild. The king was unhappy, but he understood that even a car needed time to be repaired. During the retreat, Yappy remembered a gentle female voice that had once asked him to protect a special place. These memories gave him strength and determination. After recovery, the yacht spinner returned to battle. He went to explore the area and came to his favorite place, the cemetery. It was there that he made the final decision: to protect citizens, even if they were already dead. After that, the creature returned to its base, where Lion was already waiting for it. The protagonist was surprised that he was able to find this place, and now had the opportunity to talk to the robot. This meeting promised to be decisive in the battle between human will and machine logic. In fact, Leong was the embodiment of chivalry, and he could not stand unexpected attacks, so he only sought fair fights. That's why he waited for the robot to put all its equipment in order. It is logical that not everyone always fights honestly, but this is no reason to renounce your knighthood. It was thanks to this temperament that Lion became stronger. The robot began to attack the protagonist without any hesitation. Lion, of course, was not going to lose. Using all his strength, he easily dodged the shots. Yappy soon felt how terrifying his opponent's strength was. So now they were playing hide-and-seek. Lion on his horse tried to find and catch up with the enemy. The poor robot could not understand the protagonist in any logical way. The two continued at the same frantic pace. It was a chase, shots, fire, and the neighing of horses. But this battle could not continue forever. That's why one of Lion's shots hit the target. Yappy received fatal damage, and now the operating limit was reached. Even in this state, the creature clearly remembered its purpose. As a result, it exploded. The story of this robot was quite sad. The place where Yappy first opened his eyes was in the cargo hold. The purpose of his existence was only one: help your allies in battle and protect the city from attack. So he, together with other robots, was able to repel a powerful attack and kill the enemies. And he became a hero. It was a touching story of a tank destroyer who saved a city in a desperate situation. And for citizens who had lost hope, it was incredibly valuable. The Knight of Steel became a symbol of their hope. That's how his life went. The robots, together with Yappy, defended this city, until there was nothing left that could be protected. The same woman from the tank's memories begged. It was her last request: to protect the city. So the last combat vehicle received its last order, so that no one could get close to that object. Years passed, and now Yappy was defeated. Lion, who fell into his secret base with the robot, was fine. The protagonist immediately understood what Yappy was defending. It was the Pearl of Wisdom, that thing that shouldn't exist at all. Realizing how important this mission was to the robot, Lion felt a deep respect for his dedication. The protagonist couldn't even fathom how long Yacht Spinner had been fighting alone. He recognized that Yappy was not just a machine, but a true knight of loyalty. To complete his mission, Lion destroyed the Pearl of Wisdom. He honored the robot as a true knight of loyalty who deserved to rest in peace. The head of the Hunters Association was furious. The destruction of the Pearl of Wisdom seemed to him a senseless act. However, he did not know that this pearl was a creation of demons, a treacherous artifact created to seduce human souls. At first, she granted wishes, but later demanded payment, gradually turning people into soulless creatures. Her action resembled the taming of domestic animals, where the demon gradually consumed the person with banal temptations, depriving him of his humanity. Therefore, such items must be destroyed immediately. Returning to the remains of the yacht spinner, Lion decided to honor him as a valiant knight. He consecrated the robot's body, wishing that it would finally find peace of mind. Suddenly, the room was filled with light, and it seemed to Lion that the yacht spinner had moved. A small robot crawled out from under the rubble. Impressed, Lion began to perform the ritual. He believed that the goddess would choose Yappy as the next holy knight. Incredible power once again filled the space, and the goddess Ariana descended from the heavens. Everyone present felt that before them was a holy creature, with whom no one in their world could compare. The king greeted the goddess Ariana and introduced her to the noble knight Yacht Spinner. The goddess was surprised because he did not fulfill her task. However, Lion personally vouched for Yapi, calling him a great knight who could follow the path of good. Ariana saw that the knight was overflowing with honor and knowledge. But his heart was still young. Finally, she asked to help her first knight destroy all evil. Thus a new knight of the Holy Grail appeared, Sir Yacht Spinner. Meanwhile, in the USA, in the Magic Tower, something strange was happening. The chief wizard of this country was making excuses before the Pearl. Their plans were thwarted by a certain survivor named Lion. As soon as the Pearl heard this name, she was scared. The wizard immediately turned on the news at the creature's command. Perlina was in total shock and didn't understand why this freak had appeared there. Finally, she shouted that she would never do anything again. After that, the jewel no longer made a sound. The rite of initiation of Yacht Spinner into a knight did not pass without a trace. Lion, feeling unbearable pain, coughed up blood, and his body swayed as if under the weight of an unbearable burden. The goddess Ariana, observing this, mentally addressed the knight. She understood that appointing a new knight of the Holy Grail on Earth, where faith had almost died out, required superhuman effort. Ariana was deeply grateful to Lion for his loyalty and sacrifice. She urged him to rest and trust in the gods, who were now obliged to support their saint. The goddess turned to her brothers and sisters, reminding them of their duty to their knight. On the day Lion turned 121, only one knight remained in the destroyed world. He carried within himself all the gods who shamefully hid in his body. Watching for 180 years as Lion the Lionheart destroyed the forces of evil, the burden of the entire world rested on his shoulders, and now the gods were in an unpayable debt to him. Ariana said that her knight was overtired, and it was time for the gods to break their silence. The god of iron suggested taking an example from the goddess of life, who had already taken her first steps on Earth. They decided to invest their fortunes and show people true miracles and divinity, even using this weird internet. The new knight of the Holy Grail was to help them in this. The head of the association was shown a strange video on YouTube. A video about praying to goddess Demera was posted on the King of Lions Guild channel. The men from the association were shocked, unable to believe that this survivor had decided to engage in social media. They assumed it was Hari's doing, but they doubted it. The hunters had no idea who was behind all this. Meanwhile, the advanced technologist of the computer front took up his positions. Harry worried if Sir Yacht Spinner had finished using her laptop. The knight muttered something about successful buzz marketing. And the transit network is broken. Naive Hari thought that Yapi was just playing games, proving how well-versed in technology she was. The head of the Hunters Association instantly rushed to the Lion Guild, which was located somewhere in the middle of the Naju Plain. His first demand was to immediately remove the video. But before that, he was seriously affected by something else. Who even dared to expose it? Finding out that it was the Yacht Spinner came as a real shock to him. It was hard to believe that this fighting machine was capable of such a thing. But let's get back to the main point. This whole story with its miraculous aspect sounded too fantastic. But as soon as humanity learns about those crops, there is no doubt that the whole world will flock there. And not just interested farmers, but real profit hunters. Lion, on the other hand, didn't seem to be worried at all. He calmly explained to Kim that you can't just steal the goddess's gift. He was somewhat impressed by such confidence. It turned out that there was not much time left to wait for these words to be verified. That same night, mercenaries landed in the fields. They expected to see a bunch of security, but the place was completely empty. The task was simple: collect the seeds and set up a bonfire of apocalyptic proportions. We have already received the subscription, so we decided to act without delay. People scattered across the field, each taking their own position. But something immediately seemed strange. Scarecrows are everywhere, and the longer you look at them, the more it seems like they're not just standing there, but watching. The tension was growing. The captain roared that this was all nonsense, and the main thing now was to set the field on fire as quickly as possible. They started pouring gasoline. But as soon as he wanted to send the two guys to the warehouse, they simply disappeared. And there was also a feeling that the scarecrows had become somehow too close. And then right next to me, one of the dolls appeared. The man couldn't stand it anymore. He started screaming. These creatures were indeed moving. Before them stood real monsters. The captain rushed to flee, not waiting for anyone. But on the way, he was stopped by a grain warehouse, the exact one they were looking for. I didn't even mention the monsters. I decided that since those creatures were hanging out on the field, everything would be okay with the squad. He ordered to load as much rice as possible into the car. As soon as I took a step, an explosion thundered. The warehouse turned out to be surrounded by a minefield. The mercenaries were shocked. Who had arranged all this? And then, as if from a shadow, Yacht Spinner appeared before them, calmly stated that the target would be destroyed. The next morning, all the mercenaries were already tied up. They were placed under a plaque that displayed the 5 principles of life and prosperity, and another one, the 6th, the main one, to destroy all who encroach on the harvest. After the arrest of a group that committed crimes across the country, an interesting thing happened. Blessed rice stock prices skyrocketed. Lion, expanding his business, often attended various events. It seems like the era has come when he will become a true internet star. The king was pleased. These were all actions of the gods who had adapted incredibly quickly to the modern world. Later, an event occurred that surprised everyone. The Hunters Association called all low-ranking warriors to a meeting. Imagine their surprise when Lion himself came out to them. He immediately got down to business. A recruitment drive for new soldiers was underway at the Pantheon. Those who can prove themselves and endure the training will be able to become his warriors. But first I had to pass a practical test. The task was clear, to clear the yellow gates at Ascension Station. The hunters immediately understood what was going on, because each portal had its own level of difficulty, marked by color. Black portals are for the best hunters on the planet with rank S and above. Red ones are for S-rank professionals and A-rank masters. Orange, for B-rank warriors who work under the guidance of masters. And at the end, in descending order, yellow, green, and blue portals. If the gate of Soul Station, where the protagonist observed the exam, was only blue, the yellow gate was a death trap for C-rank hunters, let alone D-rank hunters. Those who did not want to continue could leave in peace. And surprisingly, there weren't that many people left. Lion began to question them about their motivation. Tesso also came under his sights. The guy was nervous because this was a guild of a true professional. He was ready to seize this chance. Tesso believed they would not be left to die, and Lion was satisfied. He sensed the spirit and determination in his new subordinates. He said that the nobility of soldiers is manifested in their obedience. Having received the order, they must believe in the knight's honor and his power. Soon they went to the test. The hunters were equipped with heavy armor, but Lion looked like he was going for a walk. But his skin was extremely strong. Tesso hoped they wouldn't have any problems. Inside the portal, the group received an unusual task. They needed to choose one of the tribes to lead to victory in the war. It seems the point was to support local monsters. But their thoughts were quickly cut short as a pack of orcs rushed towards them. The creatures surrounded the newcomers and began to demand answers to their questions. Harry immediately glanced at the king's face, trying to understand his reaction. She decided to act on the instructions and was the first to begin communicating with the orcs. They listened attentively and soon invited the entire group to follow them. They were brought to the leader of the Battle-Axe tribe. He declared that war is an honor, and death in battle is considered a blessing. However, Lion did not hold back. His rage flared as soon as he heard these beasts talk about honor. The leader could not stand the insult, so he immediately rushed to the attack. But his attack was easily repelled. The protagonist indignantly exclaimed that these monsters were not even close to being called warriors. For him, this was true justice. Lion killed over 8 million orcs in his lifetime. His deep hatred for these creatures was even transmitted to other members of the guild. The Lionheart's aura gave allies positive effects, strengthening their resolve. The king ordered the shields to be raised and the enemy to be pushed back, waiting for the moment for the decisive blow. He was so filled with anger that it seemed he was about to lose his mind. He even summoned his warhorse to personally finish off the remnants of the orc army. When it was all over, Lion looked satisfied. But it worried Hari. Why all this? She said quietly that somewhere in the world there must be a good orc who doesn't harm people. However, Lion's credo was unchanging and strict. A good orc is only a dead orc. The history of the orcs was quite sad. After the portals opened, many of them arrived on Earth, escaping death on their worlds. The civilians even welcomed these refugees, believing that they would be able to live in peace. But over time, the orcs once again took a dark path and became a real threat. Since then, they have become a constant problem for all of humanity. Sir Yapi also received a mission, the complete destruction of the orc clan. Together with the king and Hari, he set off to a remote and sparsely populated place. There, Yacht Spinner, who had created a unique artifact, was already waiting for them. It was a container with radioactive waste that was supposed to poison the local river. The plan was simple: to wait until the orcs, tired from the battles, had gathered water. After all, this river was the only source for the entire settlement. And in the evening, the orcs began to suffer. My body ached. My stomach churned, and even the village shaman couldn't figure out what kind of curse was hanging over me. At this moment, Lion and his army rushed into the attack. The weakened orcs had no chance. After the victory, all raid participants received a notification about the completion of the hidden mission. The king was pleased because another evil had been destroyed. But it was too early to rejoice. The shaman, miraculously surviving, appeared before the victors. His cry echoed throughout the valley. Hawkrock would not forgive people for such meanness. Lion wanted to stop the strange ritual, but it was too late. The sky darkened as if before a storm. It felt like something powerful was about to appear. And indeed, the fighters received a new message. Gawkrok himself, the shaman god of the orcs, would appear before them, and it must be destroyed. The creature immediately assessed the situation. Its gaze settled on the king. The shaman god said that this freak lion was alien to this world and had to be wiped off the face of the earth. But the first blow was not powerful enough. Hawkrook howled. Someone extremely strong was guarding this freak. But who is this deity who sided with Lion? The king himself could barely contain himself. He was torn by rage. The very fact of such a steep slope disgusted him. Without wasting a second, Lion swung and chopped off the orc's arm. Hawkrook cried out. The pain was simply unbearable. Only the holy sword could have such power. God immediately recognized who was in front of him. He was not just a warrior, but the very executioner of orcs and slayer of demons. A legend that survived even in a world that looked like hell. Hawkrook didn't take any chances. He quickly retreated. And so this fierce battle ended. The lion team was busy collecting trophies, but a new order appeared. The Iron God sent a message through Yapi. The orc's hand must be preserved. Thanks to her, it was possible to strengthen the magic of the entire team. The absorbed spells will allow Goddess Ariane to better connect with Lion, and also it opened the way to restoring the power of the holy object. The king was amazed. There were only 4 such artifacts: the spear, the mace, the grail, and the lion heart. And right now is the chance to regain the power of the Holy Grail. For the protagonist, this was a real reward. Suddenly, Sir Spinner contacted one of the knights. The king immediately wanted to find out what had happened. Yapi quickly recognized the man as the thief who had been stealing trophies. Hera was tasked with verifying this suspicion. She conducted a search, and everything was confirmed. The hunter hid the heart of the chief orc, the most valuable prey. No one understood why he did it. In Korea, this is also considered a crime. But Lion wasn't even going to listen to him. He took his hand off in one fell swoop. For him, it was simple. Whoever joined the Lionheart army lived by the laws of Lionheart. And everything is clear there. Thieves' hands are cut off. Yes, it sounds harsh to the people of Earth, but the reward was worth the risk. Then Teso, whom we know, came forward. He turned to the king with a request to allow him to take away his severed hand so that he could then put it back. Of course, then the punishment would lose its meaning. But Teso explained that before they lived by different laws and did not know the new rules, and now they want at least one chance. The king appreciated these words. He told the thief to be grateful that there were those around him who could think, and as a sign of respect for this world, Lion returned his hand. But the forgiveness was not complete. There was no longer any room for him in their squad. Only those who embraced the Lionheart's military path remained. Now anyone who passes the training will never leave the king again. That same evening, all the hunters arrived at the Pantheon Guild. The Knights of the Holy Grail officially recognized that the test had been passed. But Lion conducted an analysis and immediately identified a serious problem: physical training. Therefore, from now on, everyone will train according to the rules of the regular Lionheart army. Sir Gratz himself, the same one who killed the giants, said it simply: "A man becomes stronger when he is beaten." This scared the newcomers a little, but Lion was unstoppable. He believed that only through pain and recovery is a true soldier formed. And now the warriors had to start with the simplest thing: beating each other. The soldiers tried to find some logic in all this, but they couldn't. They shouted that their bodies would simply fall apart from such beatings. The protagonist quickly realized what exactly was bothering them. They just didn't know yet that they had a real treasure: the protection of the Holy Grail. The boys immediately saw all their wounds begin to heal. The king explained, as long as they are near the Holy Grail, the body is restored. The order was simple: to destroy everyone on the way for 5 hours without stopping. And if anyone remains standing after this, Lion will personally crush them into dust. The second Knight of the Holy Grail, Jagd Spiner, was supposed to oversee this process. The warriors' routine was strict: training, a minimum of food for survival, and a few hours of sleep. But it worked. Teso has already started his own training. Everything about this new role as a knight seemed unusual, and he certainly didn't expect to hear the voice of the king himself. Lion watched his student train and immediately noticed the mistakes. He drew attention to a simple thing. The shield should cover the right shoulder of the brother. Even if nothing is visible, the shield cannot be lowered. Otherwise, a hole will form in the formation, and behind it, a breach. His Majesty used the classic, the hammer and anvil method. But Teso didn't understand how these basics would help against unpredictable monsters. Lion explained that to act correctly, you need to know a lot of hunting techniques and be able to improvise. This skill comes only during the service of the goddess in the fight against monsters. That's why soldiers are taught the most important thing, absolute honesty. And the better they master this quality, the better their chances of survival. But Teso wanted more. He dreamed of becoming a knight. He was afraid that it would be impossible for him. But the truth was simple. A knight is someone who walks a difficult path for a noble mission. He who protects the laity does good and takes an oath to serve the goddess. Anyone who takes this sacred vow is already a knight. And if Teso has enough courage and determination, he will gain Lion's respect. The boy decided he would become a knight. Meanwhile, an important event was taking place in the Magic Tower of the USA. The entity from the magic layer has returned. She was serious. She didn't want to end up on the same planet as the Holy Freak. But now she had a plan to kill him, and this time she definitely hoped it would be over. Finally, the day of the ceremony arrived, the end of Pantheon training. Everyone was preparing to attack the yellow portal. For some reason, Hari and Sir Yapi were excluded from this task. But Kim was to become an observer and assess the level of training of the warriors. The protagonist didn't speak for long. The time has come to show what they are capable of. From that time on, no more games. They were going into battle. And it was in this portal that each of them was to experience what it meant to be a soldier of King Lionheart. 49 D-rank hunters, one observer from the association, and Lionheart himself entered the gate. But Sir Yacht immediately sensed something was wrong. There were 52 people inside. Someone was clearly out of place. He instantly moved forward. Hari also wanted to catch up with Yapi, but she didn't have time. The portal shook and changed color. Now it was a red portal. Do you remember what that means? Hari was shocked. The gate had been changed, and as soon as the warriors were inside, everything became clear. It was a demon portal. Lionheart wasted no time in giving the order to attack. The observer from the association couldn't believe it. These warriors weren't even scared. The fight was wild. Kim understood that even a B-rank hunter would not be able to withstand such pressure. But these newcomers held on and fought like real soldiers. And all this in just 4 weeks of training. The king continued to motivate the army and gave clear orders. And then he appeared, the demonic troll. It could neither be stopped nor blocked. His shot was pulling for a full A rank. But Teso didn't care. He met it and withstood the blow. Sir Jack Spinner instantly rushed to the attack. And the king did not understand how his knight could end up on the battlefield if he was supposed to stay on Earth. But there was no time for questions. Together they destroyed the monster, and the rest of the demons became frightened and fled. The Knights of Sparrow were sincerely grateful, and the earthly warriors received a new mission, to protect this kingdom from the invasion of the Demon King. But suddenly everyone noticed. The portal had disappeared. Yapi immediately reported that someone else had gotten inside. Teso also offered an explanation. They were pulled into a portal, the complexity of which suddenly increased. And that meant only one thing. They wouldn't be able to get out until they cleared it completely. The protagonist felt that something was wrong here. There are no coincidences. But will he have enough strength to confront the Demon Lord himself? The Kingdom of Sparrow has a 1,000-year history, where the common people lived peacefully, as if in a fairy tale. But all of that almost disappeared in an instant. The invasion of demons wiped out almost all cities from the face of the earth. The only thing that remained undamaged was the royal castle. Those who survived fought a desperate war, clinging to the last shreds of hope. This is exactly what became the scenario for the new portal. But unlike the others, this one had a timer. Even if all the tasks are completed, if at least one monster remains, the gate will still close. The protagonist thought, something about this was unsettling. Perhaps there was another hidden task here. The association representative, Kim, asked what His Highness was up to. And Lionheart didn't hesitate. He was going to kill the Demon Lord. That same evening, he contacted Pantheon. Goddess Ariana was happy to hear from her first knight. Both Lion and his patrons have already felt the same otherworldly energy. The power was insane, one that could only belong to the devil, or someone on the level of the Demon King himself. Ariana assured him that if this creature were truly a Demon King, the energy would be even more powerful. The Pantheon also conveyed an important message. The goddess Dust wants to explore this world because she sensed something meaningful in it. And to awaken her, she will need Lion's help. The next day, the king arrived at the castle. The royal palace of Sparrow had a centuries-old history, and the butler had served more than one queen. The current one, Beatrice, was already waiting for guests from another world. Lion was serious. First, the Duke met his delegation. Then he began his speech. On behalf of the Kingdom of Sparrow, he was going to reward the foreigners who had won the battle. But the protagonist didn't like something about it. He wanted to introduce himself to the queen herself, but he was stopped every time. His patience ran out. Lion could not stand it and exclaimed that he was King Lionheart and proclaimed his title. And then he just grabbed that same Duke. It seems that Lion decided not to delay. He had already swung to twist that Duke's head. Security immediately surrounded the protagonist. But King Lionheart is not so easily stopped. His gaze pierced the lie. He calmly ordered the filthy demon to show his true face. The creature could not have imagined that someone would be able to reveal it. It was the demon. Within seconds, several more figures shed their human forms and transformed into demons. Panic set in. But Lion was not one to give up. His voice cut through the noise like a sword through the silence. He ordered everyone not to give in to fear. There are not so many of them, but if they all unite, victory will be theirs. And he was right. The knights of the castle, the guests from other worlds, all marched into battle in unison. When the dust cleared, all the lower demons lay dead. Lion moved forward. Now his goal was clear, to reach the queen herself. But the head of security stood in the way. Lion stopped, but not out of fear, out of respect. He understood the man's loyalty, but he also knew that now was not the time for bureaucracy. The king recalled that he has every right to act in critical situations. But the answer was unexpected. The queen lost consciousness. She could not decide anything. And besides, the castle was literally full of demons. Hostile energy flowed from every crevice. The head of the castle asked directly what the foreign king wanted. And Lion made no secret of it. He needed full command over all the soldiers, because only he could bring order to the chaos. Thus began a new era in the Kingdom of Sparrow. The protagonist did not hide the truth. Demons had long been hiding among ordinary people. But there was no need to despair. He had a way to detect them, to pass through the holy fire. This fire did not harm ordinary people. It did not even leave a scratch. But the demons could not stand the test and immediately threw off their masks. Lion didn't hesitate. As soon as a werewolf appeared, he immediately rushed into battle. A magician from the Magic Tower of America watched everything from afar, failed miserably. A lot of work was done, and some of the demons were even captured alive. Sir Jack Spinner took on the interrogations and data collection. Since most creatures didn't take Yappy seriously, he had to act unconventionally. Then knights came to the rescue, bringing a full bucket of holy water. And from that moment on, the interrogations went smoothly. The Knight of the Holy Grail did not stop until he heard the answer he needed. It was thanks to this that Lion received the latest information about the state of affairs in Sparrow. He was truly pleased with his friend's work, and with curiosity I asked what he did with the spies who leaked this data. It turned out that the robot disposed of the demons using a special sound signal. Lion always appreciated the music that accompanied acts of justice. But suddenly something changed. Lion became angry. His chest tightened. His breathing became heavy. He was filled with rage. The evil creatures breathed the same air as he did, and this fact was unbearable for him. Sir Yacht advised not to delay and to eliminate the source of the problems as soon as possible. The protagonist just nodded approvingly. As a demigod, he knew no fatigue, a true living mechanism. Thus began the cruel night of Purification. The wizard from the Magic Tower arrived in a rather disturbing place. As you might have guessed, it was a den of demons. The magic sphere immediately warned him not to look at the creatures around him. Mortals are too vulnerable to the influence of these otherworldly creatures. A monster appeared ahead, ordering the wizard to stop. He wondered how anyone had dared to appear on his territory, a place of luxury and painful pleasure. The magic ball whispered softly. Before them was the demon of discord, known as Androgynous. The demon immediately recognized the familiar energy inside the orb. The same goblin was indeed imprisoned there. He had an offer that Androgen could hardly refuse. But the demon just laughed mockingly and reminded the bullet who was in charge. He did not believe that after the death of an entire legion of archdemons, anyone could still claim to be his equal. That bullet immediately put him in his place. 180 years ago, not only did their rulers fall, but the Lord of Pleasure himself was wiped from the face of the world. And the one who was hiding in the ball witnessed that terrible disaster. Then 5 powerful demons united, seeking to conquer the world with one hand. But the end was tragic. 3 Overlord-level demons and over 10 million ordinary demons were destroyed. The creature in the ball was one of the few who survived. After these words, the agreement between the 2 demonic forces was concluded. The dark creature's chances of victory were now 70%. The wizard now needed to find a corpse collector, and it would seem fate played on their side. The creature just appeared ahead. But something went wrong. The bullet abruptly ordered them to hide. Right in front of them is King Lionheart. The protagonist felt the distorted energy of space, although he did not see anything suspicious. The wizard and the magic ball hidden behind invisibility froze, not even breathing. Lion felt someone's presence, but at that moment the yacht spinner appeared and reported enemy targets nearby. The king nodded, and the 2 knights of the Holy Grail set off. It was a shock. The wizard and the orb had never experienced such fear before. Back in his room, Lion was finally able to get some rest. But thoughts of the demons of discord and pleasure kept him occupied. Something didn't add up. Why was there such a concentration of demons of lust in this particular portal? What was the real reason? And then, as if out of thin air, right behind him, the queen appeared. The lady turned to him, whether to the knight or to his majesty the Lionheart himself. Lion immediately noticed her beauty. It seemed that her very appearance could be the source of the entire conflict. Such beauty was too perfect not to bring with it temptation and discord. And if she was to blame, then an ordinary person would have noticed that she was standing right over the abyss. The queen introduced herself and asked not to be so wary. She only came to greet the hero who saved their kingdom. However, Lion immediately noticed that this was not the best moment for a visit from a virgin. The queen put her hand to her heart and announced with despair she was being watched. The general and the knights keep her under surveillance, as if under lock and key. This surprised the protagonist. The general did not seem like a man capable of such betrayal. Beatrice didn't have time, but she had a request, and Lion decided to listen to her to the end before deciding anything. The queen asked to kill the general and his knights. In response, she promised to give everything. She came closer and almost whispered, asking to check the dungeons of the royal castle. After all, there is what the general is hiding. The conversation is over. The knights were already breaking in at the door, but only King Lionheart was in the room. He admitted that he had just seen Her Majesty, but the general surprisingly showed no surprise. Although these were dark times, leaving the royal person alone was too risky. Ricardo assured me that demons don't attack at night. However, Lion knew for sure that these creatures did not distinguish day from night, and the general should have known this. For some reason, Ricardo decided to end the conversation. But before that, Lion revealed one of the cards. He conveyed the queen's words, the same as her being held hostage. In response, the general abruptly interrupted him, saying that one should not talk about such things to outsiders, and left, slamming the door. The king felt that something important was hidden behind these gates. To get to the truth, it was necessary to inspect the basement. That was exactly what he had instructed Sir Spinner to do. The next day, the demons decided to launch a full-scale assault on the castle. But before they could reach the walls, the first spear was already flying towards them. The holy weapon mercilessly killed demons, and Lion took their souls to the Holy Grail. The king forced them to listen. He intended to teach these creatures the value of life. Meanwhile, General Ricardo and the knights had already gone down to the basement. They checked to see if the seal was still holding. There was very little left until the end of the century-old testament. But as soon as Ricardo threw back the covers, Yapi saw something incredible. The king's battle was successful. Countless demons were destroyed or turned into ordinary prisoners. But the strange thing is that the people's reaction turned out to be surprisingly restrained. It seemed that even such a victory could not melt their hearts. This war against monsters had no end, and only a small part of the people felt true inspiration from the triumph they had achieved. This is the bitter truth of any war. Even victories have a dull aftertaste. However, Lion was concerned about something else entirely. There were no major villains among the allies, and this meant only one thing: the special operation was successful. The next step was to go to the dungeon, and, as expected, no one was going to let him in there. But Lion was not going to waste time arguing. With one blow, he cleared his way forward. All the knights were shocked when they found themselves in this strange place under the castle. Lion recognized him instantly. It was he the queen had mentioned. His Majesty did not waste a second and immediately rushed to investigate. But what he saw stunned everyone. The queen lay on a luxurious bed like a sleeping beauty. The knights, as if enchanted, one by one began to praise her beauty and approach her. But Lion stopped them. He immediately felt the influence of evil energy. However, strangely, his own aura, which was supposed to destroy dark magic, did not work this time. We had to resort to more brutal methods. The protagonist quickly neutralized almost all of the enchanted warriors. One of them inflicted the wound on himself, breaking the spell, and the Holy Grail helped Tesso clear his mind and regain clarity. The general was shocked. He didn't expect anyone to be able to resist the queen's spell. But Lion understood everything immediately. The castle's personal guard was truly not influenced by Beatrice, but the general's words that they were simply used to it sounded like outright nonsense. Her allure was not human, it was magic, akin to a natural curse. Lion had encountered a being with similar power before, one called the Mistress of Pleasure. And yet something was bothering him. As much as he despised evil spirits, he didn't feel the usual dark energy from Beatrice. That is why Lion decided to summon the goddess of dreams and death. And the beautiful maiden immediately responded to the call of the Knight of the Gods. Goddess Dust was genuinely happy to see Lion. She immediately sensed that demons of debauchery were behind these spells. The entire ritual, filled with temptation and sin, crept through dreams, repeating itself over and over again, as if stuck in an endless circle. But even the longest dream ends sooner or later. The goddess ordered the true essence of this place to be revealed. Everything around me changed instantly. It was as if the world itself had been plunged into darkness. The Death Knights appeared before Lion. The protagonist understood everything very well. These creatures did not have enough power to create such an illusion. This meant only one thing. The roots of all this gloom stretched straight from the queen. If Beatrice woke up, the entire illusion would disappear. But he was not allowed to do this. General Ricardo rushed forward and attacked. Lion could not understand. Had this man finally said goodbye to the honor of a knight? But it seems Ricardo hasn't mentioned her for a long time. The fight was fierce and perfect for the spectators. The protagonist felt the strength of his opponent. It was truly impressive. It seemed that Ricardo was even stronger before his death. However, honor, once traded for debauchery and pride, will never allow us to protect anything real. A powerful explosion was heard. Lion raised his sword to the general's face and ordered him to wake up. He understood perfectly well how difficult the situation was. Perhaps these knights remained faithful to the end, even in death. But then why did the queen herself order them to be killed? Wasn't she the main evil of this world? Lion forced Ricardo to tell the whole truth. And it turned out to be shocking. Once upon a time, the queen made a deal with the devil. Then Sparrow stood on the verge of destruction, and she had no choice but to accept the demonic offer. This was precisely what became an insidious trap from which there was no escape. Gradually, she began to lose her mind, and the general watched helplessly as the kingdom rapidly declined. The entity that had taken up residence in the queen's body continued to seduce Ricardo, and finally, one of the faithful knights could not stand it and tried to defile her. Then Ricardo made a terrible decision, to preserve his honor and protect the queen. In the past, the castle's knights committed suicide, to continue protecting it even after death. The queen's temptations no longer worked on those who voluntarily chose death. That is why the faithful knights decided to seal their mistress under the castle itself, to protect both her and the world from further decline. She spent 80 long years in prison, not feeling time at all. And only now did the meaning of her request become clear. The goddess Dust addressed Lion. Her voice became alarming, for she sensed something terrible. The protagonist immediately understood. The demons were already leaving. And this time not individual scouts, but a real army. The situation was critical. All the warriors who had arrived with Lionheart began to prepare for defense. There were too many opponents, more than they had ever seen. But the band of future Holy Grail Knights were not going to back down. They had been waiting for this moment their whole lives. Meanwhile, the archdemon himself was giving orders to his army. His servants continuously attacked the castle like packs of hungry predators. The creatures that attacked Earthlings weren't just strong. They were made for war. Their number grew with every minute. It seemed there was no hope left, but it was just the calm before the storm. A technical pause before Lion's incredible power awakened. Even Stallion, his faithful warhorse, could not withstand such pressure. The Earthlings lacked the breakthrough force, the momentum that turns the tide of battle. And Lion himself doubted whether he was in shape to use his special technique now. But it wasn't about strength. It was about duty. He had to do everything possible, and even more. At this crucial moment, those who had long been awaited came to the rescue, the dead knights. They went through the hell of battles, losses, the shadow of defeat. But if there was a chance to change everything, they were ready to try again. One last fight. Lion just nodded to them, no words, no pathos. But that was enough. They knew that he was a symbol of hope. Even in a ruined world, distorted by the creatures of evil, Lion's heart was home to the gods. He carried something within him that neither death nor darkness nor time could take away. And at that very moment, even the hunters, even the knights who served the queen froze. They couldn't take their eyes off Lion as he once again rushed through the pitch darkness, toward where the stars shone. And behind him, hope flared up. Lionheart has officially announced himself. He was the first knight of the god of war and flame, Phaetos. His appearance was not just symbolic, it was a challenge. He was going to turn the earth into an arena of flames, where all the creatures of evil would burn to ashes. Summoning a chariot of celestial fire, Lion broke through the front ranks of demons, leaving behind only chaos and a burning battlefield. His faithful horse Stallion was finally able to rest. The moment came when the other knights were to follow him. And if they follow, victory will not be a legend but a reality. Although the situation seemed hopeless, Lion did not hesitate. He remained ahead, alone against everything. And the demons didn't even think of retreating. The archdemon went mad with rage. How could anyone possibly break through his boundless army? It seemed impossible. Magic cannons began to fire at the protagonist like a shower of stars, but Lion only gripped his sword tighter. He always despised long-range attacks. He considered them a coward's game. And now, as the shells tore the air, madness burned in his eyes. This wasn't just a fight anymore, it was a hunt. Androgynous appeared right in front of him, the demon of temptation and pleasure. But something was wrong. He didn't even understand where this mortal had disappeared to, because Lion has already attacked from the sky, from such a height from where death descends unexpectedly. He only asked his knights to hold out for 1 minute, exactly 60 seconds, and that should be enough. The archdemon began to realize that something had gone wrong. The warriors, who were just ordinary people yesterday, suddenly became stronger. It suddenly dawned on him. Before him stood Lion himself, the slayer of Dothradon, that very demon. Don't pay attention to this name, the point is different. Lion knew how to finish demon stories, and he was going to do the same with Androgen. The demon howled in rage, threatening to destroy all life, to raise worlds to dust. But we knew these were just empty cries. True strength is not noise, but the silence of determination. And Lion was silent. And he was the silence before the explosion that changes the course of the battle. His blows were not wasted. Everyone is on target without mercy. And just like that, in a sky filled with blood and flames, Androgynous was destroyed, the archdemon of debauchery and pleasure. Since the founding of the kingdom of Sparrow, peace and prosperity have reigned there. The queen believed that this would last forever. Actually, everyone was sure of this until the demons set foot on their lands. The wise ruler who possessed magic immediately understood what to do. She raised a real protective dome over the kingdom, but even he couldn't stop what came next. The dark essence of demons began to spread through cities and villages like poison. Hope disappeared almost instantly. These monsters did not die, and it became clear the destruction of the kingdom was very close. But suddenly one of the demons came to Beatrice. His proposal was simple. The kingdom must endure 100 years of destruction, and then the invasion would stop. The queen didn't even ask why she should believe this stranger. She agreed immediately. It was a cunning trap, but it was how she could save those she loved. That's how the glorious Sparrow fell. The once majestic kingdom began to sink into luxury, temptation, and spiritual decline. Wise subjects, loyal knights, and even the queen herself gradually became hostages to demons. They were bound not only by spells, but also by twisted desires. The archdemon left behind not only ruins, but also artifacts, weapons, and a crown saturated with dark power. And that's when the dust goddess intervened. She was interested in the crown itself, the symbol worn by all the higher demons of temptation. It contained a magic key capable of generating illusions. The goddess decided that this artifact would be useful to her. The protagonist was calm. The gods approved of his actions. The god of war, Thetos, even personally appeared to express his gratitude. And when two gods appeared before him at once, Lion dared to make a request. He wanted the souls of the fallen knights to finally find peace in heaven. Thetos and Pylus hesitated. They were confused by the nature of these souls. Their fates were too dark and confusing. But Beatrice intervened in the conversation. She turned to the foreign gods and asked them to forgive the knights. Her voice was full of faith and sincerity. And then the goddess of death and dreams agreed. She promised to cleanse these souls and give them another chance. But in exchange, she put forward a condition. Beatrice must become her priestess and help the Lion King spread the new faith. Only then will the destroyed kingdom have a chance to be reborn under the protection of a new power, and the souls of the knights will be able to be reborn. Beatrice accepted this offer without hesitation. After that, it was time to return to those who fought side by side with Lion. 6 soldiers died in the fierce battle. It was a great loss, and Lion prepared to pray for them. He turned to the god of war and flame. He asked to receive the souls of the fallen who died the death of the brave, so that they could enjoy a feast among the immortals. And so the gates of paradise opened. And Lion, healed but not broken, was to return to Earth. After clearing the gate, Lion and his squad returned. The head of the Hunters Association immediately registered Beatrice as one of the survivors and expressed condolences to the families of the deceased. Lion personally planned to visit the families of the fallen, and also publish a video of the operation to show the truth and at the same time recruit new hunters. He understood well. The creatures of evil would sooner or later return to their world, and then strong, well-trained warriors will be needed. But what worried him most was the strange behavior of the demons. This time he didn't wait. He decided to seek help himself. That's how Lion ended up in paradise. There the messenger of God was received with honor. Thanks to the protection of His Majesty, everything went well. The great Saint Anne personally greeted Lion, and next to him was the late king of Lapjonhart. In addition, for the first time in 180 years, new souls have arrived in paradise, and now they will be taken care of. The king immediately realized that his descendant had come for a reason. But before explaining everything, Lion wanted to turn to the gods, to discuss the situation and ask for advice. He was sent to the forest. He mounted a majestic horse and set off into the depths of paradise. Lion knew that one day he would return here with Stallion. But first he had to find an heir. The sages of the forest were happy to welcome the messenger of the gods. After all, everyone, even the gods, owed him something. Lion immediately expressed his desire to see the wise man who was closest to him. That's how he met Gunlar. He needed seedlings of an ancient tree. The world where Lion comes from, the planet Skemlia, will soon become a target for evil. He was convinced of this during his last mission. The dark forces already knew about the king's arrival on Earth, and they began to act. Gunlar understood everything. The situation resembled the kingdom. Evil was once again beginning to erode the very essence of the world. And Lion, as the only person capable of bringing something from paradise, received a sacred sprout from the sage. Gunlar, his old friend, was happy to meet Lion again, and asked him not to rush to paradise completely. After that, the hero's affairs were completed. He was about to head back, but his old friends had gifts for him. The king gave him reins, ones that could subdue even a fantastic creature. Sir Gratis gave away the legendary training manual. And the Great Feast is a special cross. This amulet was to protect Lion until the day the Holy Sword was resurrected. With that, he returned to his guild. He is truly respected even in heaven. Allies are already waiting on Earth. Lion came to visit the queen. First, he apologized for bringing her to such a miserable place. But for the ruler of the ruined kingdom, everything seemed wonderful. For some time, Beatrice will still have to maintain the balance of different energies in her body. But that's not what we're talking about now. They're gathered to honor the memory of the fallen knights. The protagonist wondered if she had managed to get used to this world. But getting used to it is not necessary at all. The main thing is to maintain pride and live by your own laws. After all, every ruler must remain himself wherever he is. Even in the other world, it is worth bringing benefit through righteous teachings. This is exactly what King Lionheart wanted. Beatrice realized that it was thanks to this world view that Lion was able to fight demons for centuries. Then he invited her to join his mission, and the queen happily agreed. She has long sought to gain all the power necessary to destroy the demons who destroyed her kingdom. During a night walk, the two kings met Hari. The protagonist asked the girl to serve Beatrice for a while. The queen immediately felt a powerful energy in her, and Lion suggested that she take out her sword and show her abilities. It was a great honor for Hari. She revealed all her fiery power. Of course, criticism from Leon poured in her direction, but along with it, there are valuable tips. And the queen advised putting fiery mana into the sword. This will make the attack much more powerful, and the flame more resistant to extinction. By the way, Beatrice also possessed incredible power, especially in magic, and Hari understood perfectly well how much more she would have to learn. After all, she had many responsibilities in the Pantheon Guild on her shoulders. Fortunately, she was helped by the yacht spinner. He took over all the accounting matters, and Hari asked him to buy her clothes that would be suitable for a servant. However, she did not know that Yacht was drawing data from online resources full of advertisements. And it was precisely this kind of clothing that turned out to be the most popular product. Well, it's time to tell you more about the new adventures of our protagonist. He recently visited the Hunter Academy. At first, the cadets were openly dissatisfied with his arrogant behavior. Lion did not stand on ceremony, spoke sharply and without embellishment. But everything changed as soon as they saw the power he carried within himself. His confidence, combat experience, and unwavering aura impressed even the most arrogant newcomers. It so happened that some of them went to the Pantheon Guild to seek true power under the leadership of His Majesty. The young hunters believed that training with Lion would turn them into true warriors. But even more of them were drawn there because of Hari. It turns out these kids were her fans. After all, she was not only a skilled fighter but also helped orphanages, for which she was very respected. The little girl thought that their heroine was on some epic mission, but the reality was much more prosaic. Poor Hari had just tried on the clothes that Yacht had ordered for her. The robot didn't understand why she didn't like it, because according to online stores, it was a top-of-the-line service kit. But while Hari was blushing with shame in a semi-indecent manner, young guests arrived at the guild. Sir Spinner rushed to greet them, while Hari, confused, tried to run away from prying eyes. When Lion saw what she looked like, he felt like he was about to explode. Never before has a meeting between an idol and fans taken place in such an awkward and strange format. Meanwhile, somewhere on one of the islands of Korea, the Red Gate opened. The Golden Lion Guild arrived for the cleanup, yes, the same one we already dealt with. Among them were many familiar hunters. But most importantly, they were facing a far from simple battle. Before they even entered the portal, they were already arguing about how to divide the loot. It was not for nothing that there were 3 S-class and 1 A+ among them, because they truly believed that they would quickly deal with any evil. But as soon as the group stepped inside, the smiles instantly disappeared from their faces. Before them stood Jobrick himself, the legendary knight of House Lionheart. And the portal's mission was clear: to defeat the mighty Geobrick. The hunters were amazed by the enemy who appeared before them. Geobrick looked majestic and menacing, and his mood was completely serious. He asked why the strangers had harmed his kingdom's army, and what would happen to them next depended on the answer. The head of the Golden Lion Guild tried to settle everything peacefully, but Geobrick was not going to change his mind. Anyone who raised a hand against the soldiers of his country must die. The sentence was simple: all 6 would pay with their lives. At this very time, the students of the Hunting Academy arrived at the Pantheon Guild. The protagonist was preparing to give a speech. Among the ranks of future knights, there was even a place for Hari. Although she was mostly Lion's assistant, today she was supposed to be by his side. Lion did not intend to take everyone. Only the most worthy would be honored to become his students. It would be a source of pride for any family because before them stood not just a warrior but a legend. But first, it was necessary to check what these young men and women were capable of. Lion ordered everyone to take up arms and hold the defense until the last one fell. Their goal is to touch the Lion King at least once. And one thing can be said: this fight was far from an ordinary sparring match. It resembled a battle against a boss from the final level. The Holy Grail protected the students from complete destruction, but even Hari lay weakened. Lion moved as if he could see the future. His defense was perfect, and his attacks were impeccably precise. The protagonist explained that it was easy to train soldiers, but with knights it was different. His first battle group was to rise to the level of royal knights, and all the others were to at least rise to a level higher. The students looked at each other in surprise. They didn't know about the level system. So Lion decided to tell us exactly how ranks are distributed among the knights of the Lionheart Kingdom. The first rank is made up of newcomers who have not yet taken the oath. Among them, those who prove themselves are chosen, and they become royal knights. Above them stand knight warriors who lead units and conduct strategic operations. Next are the Knights of Light. They are given tasks from the gods themselves. Upon receiving such a mission, they drop everything and set off on a journey until they complete it. And the highest rank is the Guardian of the Holy Grail. This title can only be obtained by someone who is already a Knight of the Holy Grail and has defeated King Lionheart himself in a duel. But right now, Lion admits, he is far from in the best shape, at most at the level of a simple Holy Grail Knight. But even so, his power remained beyond the imagination of most. The students had no idea how powerful a knight of that rank could be. Lion only hinted that understanding this power would be oh so difficult. The hunters who had just fought against Geobrick woke up in a completely unfamiliar place. As it turned out, they were saved by the tribe's shaman, Hilda. She was sincerely grateful because the foreigners stood up to protect her people from the cruel army of the kingdom. One of the huntresses didn't remember what happened at all. They were lucky to escape. The opponents were ordinary infantry, and carrying heavy armor on the run was not so easy. However, Geobrick, a true monster, did not lag behind and chased them almost to the very end. That's when the Woodson tribe came to the rescue. Even an experienced shaman could not completely heal one of the hunter girls. It's all because of the curse that Geobrick places in battle. The saint's power prevented her body from healing. But magical seals have already begun to appear on the bodies of foreign warriors, special marks applied by the tribe, which have various restorative properties. After this, the elders of Woodson called a council. They had long suffered at the hands of the kingdom's army. They were called heretics. Villages were plundered, innocents were tortured and skinned. And although the tribe tried to defend itself, it was impossible to stop this hell. Then they turned to God in prayer, and in the end, strangers came to them in answer to their pleas. But even with these defenders, Geobrick remained too powerful an enemy. His armor could withstand the blow of a huge bull's horns, and even after being burned to the ground, this knight could regenerate. While he was alive, all the other knights received blessings. To even the odds, special weapons were needed, piercing artifacts. And then Hilda reported that one of her tribe's seals had similar properties. Hearing this, the hunters were amazed. Thanks to such power, they had a real chance to defeat the monster. The strangers were ready to take on the defense of the tribe. The locals also promised to help these strangers from Earth in any way they could. At this time, Lion arrived at the horse farm with the students. The students have already passed the first tests in basic training. Now they faced an important task: to find their faithful companion. For a knight, a horse is not just an animal, but a true friend for life. It was important to find someone with whom there would be complete mutual understanding. The children were delighted and scattered around the farm looking for their future companion. Even Queen Beatrice personally appeared here. Both she and Harry quickly picked out worthy mounts for themselves. But this almost idyllic picture was interrupted by disturbing news. Lion was urgently summoned to the head of the Hunters Association. The dungeon was about to be breached soon. Although the king was not obligated to intervene in every portal, this time the situation was different. For the gate boss has declared himself a servant of the goddess of life and fertility, and this is definitely more than just a dungeon. When the protagonist squad arrived at the gate, they were immediately overcome by an uneasy feeling. Inside, there was an eerie silence and an unnatural emptiness. The name of this place spoke for itself. The boss of this gate was Geobrick. This name is well known to Lion, and as soon as he surveyed the area and the place of execution, everything became clear to him. The knight seems to have set himself the goal of exterminating an entire people, all the creatures that once lived here. The squad followed the tracks, trying to understand what exactly happened, but Beatrice noticed that Lion was going too fast. His gaze was stern, his gait determined. He admitted he had miscalculated. This territory was a trap for anyone who lacked sufficient strength or experience, because here the Knight of the Holy Grail appeared. Sir Geobrick was the favorite of the goddess Demera 3 generations before Lion. He lived over 800 years ago, defeated barbarian hordes, and, according to legend, was supposed to ascend to heaven. But something went wrong, because Geobrick apparently never made it to paradise. Even Beatrice was shocked. She couldn't believe that such a thing was even possible. But Lion had 3 theories. The first was that Geobrick had miraculously survived. The second is that his soul is stuck between worlds. And the third, the most terrible, is desertion. If this is true, then the upcoming battle with him will not take place on human territory, and this clash may be the key to the truth. That is why an attack on the goal was inevitable. Lion gave his men clear instructions. No matter what happened, they were to stick by the king and not rely solely on their own feelings or guesses. There were only a few steps left to the truth. Soon Hari screamed. A battle was raging in the village. Lion was screaming too. He was filled with anger. It all reminded him of the battles with the orcs, the same feeling of rage and powerlessness in the face of cruelty. He called his enemies vile bastards. Hari was sure that the king had set out to save the people, but her heart sank at the thought that His Majesty had attacked the tribe himself. Hari couldn't believe what she saw with her own eyes. Her king, has he really gone mad? Everything inside the girl screamed that this was not right to do to ordinary people. They were supposed to stand by those who were attacked and protect them. And she was about to stop Lion, but Beatrice quietly asked her to wait a moment. She said that you can always trust Lion. He never makes stupid decisions. The squad did not actually enter the battle, despite the brutality of what they saw. But not because they lacked a sense of justice. It's just that this place was completely different. Behind these gates, everything is mixed up: monsters, shadows of the past, echoes of old tragedies. They didn't kill the living, only the remnants of other people's memories. So there was no sin in that. When everything calmed down, the knights approached Lion. They hailed him as the keeper of the Holy Grail, an honor not everyone attains. Their leader called himself Benedict, and although the name was familiar, Lion could not remember this young man. If he truly belonged to the Grail Order, he should have been in heaven long ago. So either he didn't finish his training or he died in battle. None of the faces told him anything. Lion introduced himself and said that the goddess Ariana had given him the lion heart. Everyone understood. This title had once belonged to someone else, but the knights believed him. And then the king got to the point. He had to find out why these knights were here, and most importantly whether Geobrick had sent them. Everything depended on the answer. Because Lion had to immediately meet with the Holy Knight himself, he needed to know the truth. Meanwhile, the hunters who had joined the tribe prepared for the attack. They understood. This gate was complex and dangerous, closer to the black rank. But the 4 S-rank fighters were more than capable of it, especially with the magic seals. With them they had a real chance. But Sir Jobrick was disappointed by their foolishness. The mercenaries did not accept his mercy, did not flee, but returned. And this time, Demira's loyal servant will not let them disappear. The knight always acted according to the laws of justice, and foreigners, in his opinion, had crossed this line long ago. So now a powerful spell awaits them, the punishment of heaven. The situation of the heroes was becoming critical. Gilbrick's decision was unequivocal. Everyone must bow their heads before the true gods. But at that very moment, a miracle happened. The earth suddenly shook, and everything around began to collapse. The divine punishment fell from the heavens, and the earth trembled. The hunters were shocked. They had never seen such power before. In an instant, 3,000 warriors of the tribe simply disappeared from the face of the earth. It was hard to believe that this knight could be defeated at all. Jobrick prayed to the goddess to protect the holy ground they were treading on, and to grant the heretics one last chance for redemption, or to erase them from existence. A bloody battle began. Gobrick could not believe that simple mercenaries had so much power within them. But the reason was in the seals. Perhaps these fighters did not follow the path of honor, but acted according to the will of the gods. The Knights of the Holy Grail had spent decades honing their swords and could hunt non-stop when the time came. The hunters quickly realized that they could not win. They needed to flee immediately, if only the other guilds would come to their aid. But their conversation was suddenly interrupted by the appearance of a shaman. Hilda from the tribe approached them in despair. She was afraid that the hunters would abandon her people to their fate. And although they weren't going to share their plans with some gatekeeper, this moment changed everything. Hilda screamed that once again they had failed to close that damned gate. She was filled with hatred for people. She snapped and said she would take the shortcut this time, even if he didn't like it. But it was because of the humans that the tribe lacked enough strength. Then she began to invoke some powerful magic. It seemed to be the blessing of the beast god. And if this is truly the case, then very soon they will be covered by a force that will be difficult to contain. The shaman ordered her puppets to kill Gilbrick, but the knight only shook his head sadly. The mercenaries turned out to be even more stupid than he thought. They voluntarily allowed the barbarians to impose those seals on them. The situation began to rapidly spiral out of control. Gilbrick has already decided. He will return the survivors back to their world, even if you have to sacrifice your own life for it. But suddenly a voice came from afar, a cry of glory for the kingdom of Lionheart. And right in front of the holy knight appeared Lion. Calmly, clearly, and without fear, he called himself King Lionheart. Beatrice wasn't even surprised. She had expected just such a move from His Highness. Lion and his team rushed forward without hesitation. Hari was, to put it mildly, not thrilled, especially when she learned that people were literally being skinned and children were dying in the fire. But neither the kingdom nor the knights were naive. The skin was removed because of the seals on it. It was an oath of service to the beast god. And if you abuse this power, the seals begin to eat away at your soul from the inside. Hari knew that something like this happened in the dark legends of the devil himself. Lion only noted that people have become too dependent on slogans about rights, and what good is that if there is no order? The world does not need pity, but true uncompromising justice. On the battlefield, he immediately sensed that something was wrong with Jobrick's divine law. But first, the enemies had to be finished off. The king decided to apply the great law of God. Everything around shone with light, bright as the sun itself. The knights were instantly healed, and the enchanted people came to their senses. Gilbrick simply froze in confusion. His gaze was filled with faith, for before him was the very power he had forgotten about, truth. And then, as if out of nowhere, the goddess Demira appeared. The immortal patroness turned to her faithful knight, asking him to support Lion. There was no doubt left in Gilbrick's heart. From now on, he follows his true king. Lion was happy, too. It was an honor to have Jobrick by his side on the battlefield. Meanwhile, all the members of the tribe gathered together to merge into one monster. This beast had one goal, to crush King Lionheart. And at that very moment, Beatrice appeared. Her Majesty has come to pave the way for Lion. Only together could they defeat the heretics. The shaman tried to escape, but what thief would do otherwise? She was furious. The Lionheart King himself had interfered with her plans. But before she could take a step, Beatrice grabbed her. The queen pulled out a mana stone, the same one she had recently found while hunting in the portals. There was a suspiciously large amount of ore behind the gates. These stones were used to catch monsters. And Beatrice didn't stop. She kept talking. She knew the gate, like herself, was stuck in a time loop. And although it wasn't a demon standing before her, the essence of their actions was the same. And this means that the conversation promises to be very interesting. To persuade the shaman to be frank, she used seduction spells. But the gods were outraged. Their priestess had betrayed them. And in a moment they should have appeared right on this portal. Before the breakthrough of the gods, all the warriors took a breath. They were resting after the fierce battle. But one piece of news broke the silence. Sir Jobrick and the other knights would no longer be able to leave these gates. To close them, you will have to defeat the main knight of this world. Gilbrick just laughed. In all these years, no one has been able to defeat him. Suddenly, the sky was covered with red cracks, and voices filled with hatred came from them. They called for the death of King Lionheart. The emergence of the gods began, and it was no longer possible to stop this process. The imprisoned shaman whispered that the end had come for these gates, and then Gilbrick said something that no one expected. Even I was shocked. The only way to close the gate is for it to fall. That is, Gilbrick must die. And there was no point in fighting for the portal, which was about to disappear. So everyone decided they wouldn't run away. It's time for the final battle. They will lay down their heads for the sake of the future. Lion felt ashamed. He knew he could not be as loyal as Jobrick. But before his sacrifice, the knight had one last request. He gave the king a warhammer, a piece of his power. And he asked to keep him until someone truly worthy appeared. Lion promised to remember Jobrick's glorious feat. So the knight gave his last order. It was hard to hear those words. After all, the knights of Lionheart deliberately went to their deaths. They will die for justice, and the gods themselves will stand behind them. Lion ordered everyone to head to the portal, and he stayed behind, together with Hari, in a parallel world. His Majesty was waiting for the moment to fall, but unexpectedly Lion felt sick. Meanwhile, Jobrick ascended into the heavens. His rage was indescribable. The Knights of the Holy Grail have always served the sacred law, and oaths spoken in battle must be fulfilled. And that is why this day is worth remembering. Our protagonist devoted all his free time to training. You might be surprised, but Lion is very tired. And no, it's not because of physical exertion or difficult battles. He had never felt so tired even when he was fighting demons. The fact is that something has appeared that he is afraid of losing. Lion began to fear again, that in the future he would have to fight alone again. Harry unexpectedly burst into the training room. It was already quite late, so both were surprised by such a meeting. The girl said that everyone has been exclusively training lately. Lion liked this mood and decided to show his assistant something. The protagonist ordered to raise his sword and try to repel his blow. I'll say it right away. It's practically impossible. But you also wonder how it will all end. His Majesty commented in detail on what Harry should do at such a moment. Thanks to his advice, the girl was indeed able to restrain this incredible power for a moment. But Harry got it anyway, for her mistakes. After telling her a little about the knights and their exploits, which were worthy of dedication, Lion ordered her to go and rest. And of course the king's sadness did not escape Harry's eyes. She immediately told Sir Spinner about this. These two quickly realized the real reason: stress. And entertainment takes it best. And in Harry, unlike Yappy, there were already ideas that could be thought of. The robot couldn't help but agree how wonderful her plan was. Meanwhile, Lion went to talk to the gods. Ariana and the others noticed that after 200 years of continuous fighting, it was high time for their valiant defender to enjoy a rest. And Ariana even meant sharing a bed with a woman. The goddess considered the queen a good match for Lion, but she also didn't rule out Harry. Ariana knew the knight should revive his royal family as soon as possible. Lion was just about to object to the goddess when Harry suddenly flew into the hall. It seems that the girl has prepared something important for the king. The protagonist immediately remembered her previous surprise, but Harry quickly explained that this time things were completely different. So they found themselves in front of the portal. Captain Kim reported that even the association joined in implementing this idea. Harry sincerely believed that His Majesty would like such a gift. The assistant began to talk about these gates. They were not exactly ordinary. Inside was full of various animals and monsters, and for killing each species, a different number of points were awarded. Lion immediately realized that this was some kind of hunt, and it was extremely thoughtful of Harry to prepare an entire portal for such entertainment. The king hadn't done this for a long time and wasn't even sure if he would like it. But in the process, His Majesty literally went crazy. For the first time in a long time, the protagonist picked up a bow and arrows and also began collecting souvenirs from fallen enemies. Harry remembered well that the king did not like ranged weapons, but he wielded them as if the gods themselves had placed power in his hands. And since hunting was considered a true hobby of aristocrats, all knights had to be masters at it. Lion was known as the strongest champion of all time, but only the second-best hunter in history. The first was a girl who was protected by the goddess of the moon in the hunt. Her arrows flew like meteorites, and if she used all her strength, she could even pierce a mountain. In addition, His Majesty found something strange, a cursed totem. It was a very rare artifact. Harry was supposed to sell it and give the proceeds to the hunt organizers. But most importantly, the girl was happy that Lion finally felt better. Interesting events began the day Geobrick's hammer disappeared. In reality, he was just standing there in the middle of the guild yard, but no one could move him even a millimeter. Of course, the protagonist lifted it without any problems. However, the weapon immediately showed its character. When Lion touched the hammer, something inside him clicked. The king realized that Geobrick was trying to transfer his power. So it's time to find this powerful relic a new owner. An order was immediately given to notify the Hunters Association. Whoever can lift the hammer will become its keeper. But first, the weapon itself had to be evaluated. They invited an expert, and the poor guy was simply shocked. Before him was an epic-level item. To fight monsters, hunters use special weapons divided into ranks. The highest among them is legendary, for artifacts created through superhuman effort. However, in recent years, several more special weapons have appeared that have received a new highest rank, epic. Among them is the Sword of the Master of Mount Shivan, capable of destroying the heavens of the heavenly demon itself, the 12 Rings of Hera, whose magical power can cause a global catastrophe, the Ice Queen's Heart, which still supports life in the snowy regions, and also the Wandering Demon Sword, which disappeared after the Black Portal incident in London. One such item can change the course of battle even in the most desperate situation. And now another one has been added to this list, Geobrick's hammer. News of this instantly spread throughout Korea, and countless applicants began to flock to the guild. The hammer sometimes behaved stubbornly. He rejected the unworthy without hesitation. Sir Yacht's approach was also interesting. He began charging a fee to visit the relic and attempt to lift it. And also, he collected offerings from the Pantheon Guild, Or rather, he spun around like a squirrel in a wheel. In fact, such a marketing move only fueled people's interest in the shrine. And the idea that Jubric's hammer was profitable fueled Spiner's passion even more. Recently, the Pantheon Guild has become a real place of pilgrimage. Hunters came to challenge the hammer. Visitors came to simply stand by and be healed. Everyone, without exception, wanted to see the holy relic with their own eyes. And Yacht Spiner, taking advantage of this attention, tried to monetize the situation to the maximum, all for the sake of the guild's needs and improving its reputation. All of this was supposed to go towards improving the organization's infrastructure. Thanks to the latest technology, Sir Yacht built an advanced forge, but he still lacked the equipment. Therefore, Yappy was feverishly looking for new sources of income. And tonight he will become a thief-in-law again. Recently, the stock market crashed. The reason is that a mysterious figure, similar to the ghost, bought up all the profitable stocks. That someone was making crazy money manipulating the stock market and going unpunished. Of course, under the mask was none other than Sir Yacht. He was particularly interested in the global food problem. Most of the land was poisoned due to contaminated water. The West and Asia initially dealt effectively with these consequences, but the countries of Eastern Europe found themselves in a dire situation, especially after the breakout of the dungeons. And then Yappy bought the poisoned territories for a pittance. His first project was a granary in the People's Republic of Hairun. There, the land was cleansed by spreading faith in the goddess of life, Dimeru. Of course, the grain from those lands does not compare to the harvest from the Korean plains, but the products were quite acceptable for daily consumption, and most importantly, the region began to recover. Yacht understood. Pantheon had actually become a leader in the food market. But the risk was obvious. The new lands could be invaded. Despite this, Yappy believed that no sane leader would start a war over such unstable territory. By the way, an interesting detail. Before expressing any of his opinions, Sir Yacht always starts with the phrase, Kiruk. I advise you to remember it. However, the war did begin, and Yacht had to talk to Hari in person. He told her about the stock portfolio, thanks to which the guild's budget is growing steadily. From now on, the investment unit will also take care of Hari's own budget. All she needs to do is register on the exchange. The girl's financial situation was truly dire, so investing the money seemed like a logical step. Yacht cunningly tapped into a weak spot, stating that young people who live in a capitalist world and do not know how to manage their finances are essentially giving up on life. And these words worked. Hari agreed. She became a silver-level client, which meant 200% profit. And if he invites 5 more clients, he will receive gold status with a profit of 300%. The girl was too naive to understand that she had fallen into a classic financial pyramid. The worst thing is that no one doubted her good intentions, and Sir Spinner's pyramid grew rapidly. But everything fell apart in an instant when a representative of the district court visited the Pantheon Guild. He officially announced the seizure of all their assets. This news stunned Lion. He immediately demanded an explanation. First, the guild did not pay interest on the loan. Secondly, a bunch of Pantheon employees got into debt because they entrusted their savings to Yacht Spinner, and his investment scheme failed miserably, leaving behind only ruins and colossal losses. The workers seemed to be paralyzed. Panic began to spread like a virus, but Lion sternly stopped the hysteria. He was convinced that with a brain like Sir Spinner's, even this disaster could be overcome. And indeed, the robot promised to fix everything by tomorrow morning. His Majesty even solemnly swore, every victim will get their money back. It was then that Sir Spinner launched a new special operation, under the title Restoration of the Foundation. Meanwhile, in the neighboring republic near Hairun, rather strange things began to happen. The orcs, who had settled there for a long time, noticed something unusual. A meteorite was supposedly rapidly approaching their lands. But in reality, it was a powerful orbital weapon belonging to America. Someone hacked the control system of this weapon. And yes, you guessed it right, Yacht's participation was not missing here. The target was the People's Republic of G. That's where the orcs lived. A fake video quickly spread online. The American president allegedly declaring war on G. Everything looked quite believable, even though it was a complete fake. The orcs quickly realized that they had only one thing left to do: collect the money and flee. But they failed to do even that. They were attacked. And the robot, impassive and cold, said only one thing: give me my money back. The Spinner yacht immediately activated total destruction mode. The orcs had a hard time, but they held on and defended themselves desperately. The Holy Grail Knight fired his entire arsenal, destroying his enemies one by one. Only one goal remained. The chief orc had a weapon made of a unique metal, so strong that even a dragon could not withstand the blow. Interestingly, Yakta's combat robot suit was made from the same material. It turned out that the forces were almost equal. Spinner understood that this battle could not be won outright. The plan began to fall apart right before our eyes. The main thing was that there was not enough time. But he maneuvered. He seeded the battlefield with cobwebs, collected critically important data, and then used the main rule of tactics. And everything was resolved instantly. The last orc simply exploded on the spot. After these mysterious events, the strange war suddenly stopped. This was what was shown on the evening news that Hari and Sir Yapi watched together. The girl cheerfully reported that the Pantheon Guild's profits had increased by 200%. Her naive mind was still occupied with everyday trifles. But Lion was thinking about something completely different at the time. He had less and less time left. It was necessary to begin preparing young warriors for presentation to the gods as soon as possible. He already had several potential candidates, mostly students who had just graduated from the academy. One of the girls even reminded him of someone from the Lionheart Kingdom. However, all these thoughts were cut short when a strange feeling came over Lion. The hammer was moved, and what he saw was definitely not part of any plans. Sir Jobrick's sacred hammer ended up in the hands of the warrior Tesso. Of course, after everything he saw, Tesso immediately joined the band of warriors personally trained by Leon. The cadets were happy about this addition. A new ally, and one with the legendary hammer, sounded promising. But not everything was so rosy. Something truly disturbing happened. The Sea Gate, known as the Dragon Palace, has made itself felt again. They first appeared in Tokyo Bay 25 years ago. Back then, people believed that portals only appeared on land, so no one paid much attention to sea areas. And it was costly. The breach destroyed the bay and turned the sea into a toxic swamp. But never mind the past. Now the typhoon was heading straight for the Korean islands. The association had to urgently contact the Pantheon Guild. But suddenly, before they could react, the Phoenix Guild arrived. The same hunters who had already shown their strength in Korea more than once. Their leader hoped that the association would also bring out its main trump card, and not in vain, because the consequences of the battle at the gates of Geobrick were still fresh in the memory, and indeed Lion himself soon appeared. And if the king was summoned, then the reason was definitely serious. The typhoon made clearing the gates difficult, so Japan and the United States agreed to help Korean hunters. And for His Majesty, this was the perfect moment to reaffirm his position. The protagonist was quite satisfied, but immediately clarified the guild would have to take care of a solid payment. As always, Yacht Spiner was in charge of finances. After a brief meeting, Lion dictated a list of participants in the upcoming operation. And then something alarmed the assistant. There was not a single female name on the list. He only gave her a skeptical look at her question, saying it was a stupid question. Because as our hero believes, a woman on a ship is always a bad thing. That's the truth of his life. King Lion was given a ceremonial welcome at the First Fleet of the Republic of Korea. Before beginning the briefing on the operation, the Admiral decided to have a brief meeting with his allies, the American soldiers. Chief among them was the master of the magic tower named Shellman. But as soon as he recognized His Majesty among the crowd, he, along with his magic sphere, realized they were in complete trouble. If the king notices them, they will have no chance of survival. Shellman was saved by the Archdemon's gift, a ring that hid demonic energy. But something went wrong. Under the pressure of Lion's power, the artifact began to crack and crumble. So after a brief introduction, the wizard hastily retreated. Meanwhile, Hari was strolling through the fleet grounds and came across Tesso. She was amazed that such a respected knight would help the porters. It was obvious that the king would hardly have ordered him to do such work. Tesso, although it was nice to hear the praise, thought it was all too much. But Harry insisted. She couldn't move the hammer even a millimeter. The girl cheerfully mocked the king, pretending to repeat his haughty speeches, saying that mortals should not doubt His Majesty's choice. She poured out motivational and funny phrases, not even suspecting that the king himself was already standing behind her. Of course, Lion was not thrilled with such a spectacle. He saw this as disrespect for his sincere intentions. But despite everything, the incredible happened. Grace descended on Hari. The divine lord of the sea and waves chose her as his priestess. And now the girl's participation in the operation was a done deal. However, something in Lion's gaze was alarming, and for good reason. His Majesty decided to circumvent the old omen about a woman on a ship. He had his own plan, to make a figurehead out of Hari, and only then were they finally able to set out to sea. In fact, the situation was much more dangerous than it seemed at first glance. The ships were already approaching the epicenter of Typhoon Nabi, and His Majesty, as if nothing had happened, was calmly fishing. Harry couldn't understand where the fish could have come from, right next to the military fleet in the middle of a stormy sea. And yet Lion was able to extract the prey. The Vice Admiral was immediately ordered to prepare. In fact, all this was part of a special ceremony of the Lord of the Sea. The protagonist called upon the divine being to appear before those who had invaded his waters. Even experienced sailors saw something like this for the first time. The waves seemed to enclose the ships in a living ring. God immediately recognized his protector and faithful guide. Lion was also happy to see Poma, although the sea here seemed too shallow to him, and there were no sails on the ships at all. He explained that this world had not yet grasped the true teachings of the sea. But Poma's choice was not accidental. Hari became the perfect vessel for divine power. Of course, she couldn't match Lion, who could contain any deity, but it was a significant step. So Hari received Poma's blessing and the gift of controlling water and waves. Her mission was clear, to accept this gift and spread the teachings of God throughout the world. And as long as the priestess remained on the ship's branch, not a single wave threatened their journey. The ritual went surprisingly smoothly. Hari finally realized the immense power she now held in her hands. Meanwhile, American ships were also following the Korean squadron, and nothing escaped the magical sphere. She immediately felt the activated power of the sea. This meant one thing: it was time to focus on clearing the gate. The hunters transferred to small boats to reach the portal. And finally, the cleanup operation led by the Pantheon Guild has officially started. By some miracle, Hari ended up on the island. And no, she wasn't alone. It seems they were caught in a tornado while going through the portal. But a few hunters were missing. Among the missing were King Lion and Yappy. Unexpectedly, a calm voice sounded in Hari's head. It was Poma. He remained nearby, taking the form of a small turtle to personally protect his priestess. Moreover, the divine being knew very well what exactly had happened. Poma had not been able to dispel the whirlwind, but the force of the waves had carried everyone to a safe shore. Hari was incredibly grateful for this support, although she had no idea what to do now. Meanwhile, the island was overrun with monsters. The girl was about to deal with the crabs with her fire, but the flame suddenly went out. Poma was worried. The priestess of the Lord of the Sea and Waves should not have used other people's elements. In another part of the island, the wizard Shellman also skillfully dealt with the monsters. Using magic, he revived one of them and ordered him to be brought to the obelisk. The sphere reported that there must be several such obelisks, and they were all subject to destruction. Shellman was suddenly intercepted by other hunters. It turned out that everyone had been given the same task, to destroy the Rakshar obelisks. However, the head of the Phoenix Guild decided to proceed cautiously. Previous experience suggested that the real threat might not be where they expected it. In the past, they were supposed to destroy Geobrick, but the real enemy turned out to be something completely different. So first we had to find out who this Rakshar really was. Meanwhile, Hari, along with some of the hunters, repelled the monster attack. Hunter Tesso noticed a disturbing fact. His Majesty's aura had no effect on the knights. Although they recently checked, the radius of Lion's aura reached 30 kilometers. Now its influence has completely disappeared. The surrounding islands were much smaller, so the reason must have been something else. Poma also could not establish contact with King Lionheart. Where did Lion go? In fact, the protagonist went to the depths of the sea. Sir Yappy also ended up on the island. He was surrounded by a crowd of crabs and, unable to contain his surprise, blurted out his favorite phrase, Kiruk. Surprisingly, the creatures happily repeated it after him. Even Yacht Spinner was a little confused by such a scene. Meanwhile, the knights checked to see who had disappeared during the whirlwind. On the island, in addition to the Knights of the Holy Grail, there were also American hunters. Their leader turned out to be Alan, an S-rank warrior and a fairly well-known figure. The man was also concerned about the absence of the Korean leader. However, there was no need to discuss the situation for long. A test was looming over them, the first wave of monsters. The hunters had to fight against unknown creatures. Without the king's buffs, it was not easy for the knights. But thanks to joint efforts, the warriors were able to repel the attack of A-rank monsters. Meanwhile, on another island, 36 hours have passed since the spinner yacht was rescued by monster crabs. They suspiciously obediently carried out all his orders, which allowed them to successfully repel a wave of opponents. The robot managed to study local features. The renewal of waves of monsters took about 12 hours, and the crab-like creatures themselves had anomalous growth and reproduction rates. His thoughts were interrupted by the voice of one of the cadets. It was Kim. The guy reported that not a single obelisk had been destroyed yet. This information was important because Sir Yacht did not see the system window with the task. Together they began to analyze the known data. Waves of monsters were getting stronger each time and trying to destroy the obelisks. Yacht rationally assessed the situation, considering the losses among the Kiruk, as he now called the crabs. At the current rate, they will lose in the fifth wave. For successful combat, the minimum requirement was the presence of edged weapons. However, Kim made an interesting discovery. Behind the waterfall on the island was a cave, and inside it was an entire underground city. It seems that the Kiruk nation was much more advanced than it seemed at first glance. Meanwhile, His Majesty found himself in a difficult situation. Diving into the depths of the sea, he came across traces of an ancient civilization, an entire lost world. Apparently, this territory belonged to someone special, either a being with divine powers or a high-level demon. Lion called this creature to talk, and the monster responded. He knew well who stood before him. Knight Lionheart was well known among demons. Finally, after 500 years of waiting, the demon got a chance to meet his old enemy. Meanwhile, Hari was busy with important work. She not only had to deal with the monsters, but also save the Lion King. To do this, she had to awaken the powers of the sea as soon as possible. Palma, the patron saint of the sea, gave advice. He explained that Hari needed to follow the main principles of the sea and waves. Only in this way could she strengthen her faith. Through sincere gratitude to the sea as an infinite source of life, the girl had to strengthen her connection with the elements. At the same time, there was a danger. Hari could mistakenly confuse the path of a believer with the path of a priestess. However, her conversation with the deity was interrupted. A Rakshara obelisk was found on the island. Meanwhile, on another island, the Phoenix Guild was defending an obelisk. The Korean hunters were suspicious of the task, while the Americans insisted on destroying the obelisk because it met the conditions of their quest. There was no other way out. The obelisk was destroyed without much effort. Now the warriors have only 2 goals left. In addition, after the destruction of the obelisk, a new wave of monsters never appeared. Taking advantage of the situation, the hunters decided to go to another island. They were even lucky. The waves had washed several boats ashore, so now they could split up and help other squads. The Phoenix Guild was the first to reach the new island and was shocked by what they saw. The coast was strewn with weapons, as if a fierce battle had taken place here. Many wanted to leave immediately. Something was clearly wrong with this place. But I couldn't escape. The Kiruk detachment, armed with the latest firearms, came out to confront them. The battle seemed inevitable. The hunters thought they had been waiting for a long time. But suddenly an imperious voice rang out from the depths, ordering them to bow. Before them stood the captain of the Kiruk detachment, Sir Spinner. The Phoenix Guild was stunned. Standing before them was not an enemy, but a Holy Grail knight along with a cadet from the Pantheon. So, let's talk about what was happening on the portal right now. Hari was with the Wizard of the Magic Tower, while Yak Spinner joined the Phoenix Guild. Only 2 of the obelisks remained, and one of them was guarded by Hari. The girl clearly felt the obelisk could not be destroyed. She saw the dark energy that the monument was holding back. But the wizard didn't care. He acted sharply and without hesitation, destroying the obelisk with one blow. A bad feeling immediately gripped everyone. An incredibly powerful monster, the Rakshar, emerged from the depths of the sea. The archdemon awoke and ordered everyone to obey. The creature imposed an aura of chaos on all living things. The lands turned black. People became entangled in their own despair and were ready to throw themselves into death. Hari understood. We need to bring everyone back to their senses as quickly as possible. But even they tried to kill her. The situation had become critical. Could she withstand the attack of the S-rank warrior who had attacked her? Suddenly, his blow was stopped by another warrior. For a moment, Hari thought that someone else had remained conscious and had come to her aid. But she was wrong. She was thrown with a powerful blow straight into the sea. Hari couldn't believe that she would die just like that. She thought about how miserable her life was. Poor Hari could not possibly reach the power of his majesty. The girl was never able to become a worthy knight, a priestess of a deity. But it was in her moment of despair that Poma came to her. The deity called upon her to fill her heart with faith, loyalty, and trust in the boundless waters. If she listens, she can hear the song of the sea. Poma reminded him that if Hari really wanted to gain the power of the immortal, he shouldn't try to hold it in his hands. Right now she was in infinity. Hari felt a surge of incredible power, and in this endless flow, she suddenly saw the trace of His Majesty Lion, clearing the way with the incredible power of the waves. The girl finally found the king. After heroism, of course, comes a time for weakness, and His Majesty was saved by Hari. He praised the girl for her efforts, and now he rode with her on the stallion to help others. Lion knew well. The archdemon had awakened, and it was difficult for mere mortals to keep their wits about them in the face of such immense evil. As soon as they landed, the king sprang into action. The Lionheart's aura resisted the demon's power. After listening to the knight's report, Lion ordered them to retreat from the gate, and if they truly believe in the priestess's protection, they will be able to walk on water, gathering all the survivors. Meanwhile, the king himself, along with the priestess, will hold the defense, to buy at least a little time for everyone. On Sir Spinner's Island, the Rakshar went wild, but the strange energy of the Holy Grail Knight held him back, and this gave the opportunity for the Kiruk army to strike first. The battle could not be avoided. A wave of incredible size was approaching the island. But this time, disaster was avoided. Hari, using the power of the sea, stopped the wave. Meanwhile, King Lionheart has found all the hunters. Sir Spinner also realized the seriousness of the situation. Lion ordered the last obelisk to be destroyed and the gates to be closed, because without the Holy Sword it was impossible to defeat the archdemon. Until the Tree of Peace blooms, we need to save as many people as possible. Spinner also advised saving the island's natives, because the Kiruk people had once sealed away the demon and were definitely not just a decoration for the gate. Everyone hurried to the gate. Meanwhile, the temporarily imprisoned demon spoke to the king. The creature whispered that Lionheart would always lack one final step, for there was no escaping the great demon.
He arrives at the Yun family residence. He runs as fast as he can to Mrs. Fanny to report that the thief has been discovered. Someone from
the creatures that were still alive came to his aid. Huge island crabs attacked the Rakshara.
But who is it that managed to contact the heir family is unknown. He was brought by Lena from the 5th Link.
This powerful blow, filled with divine power, decided the fate of the battle.
The lady says there is no need to find out anything more. She's going to meet Tom herself.
But there was no time for surprise. The king immediately ordered them to retreat from the gate. The evacuation of the Kiruk people was already 80% complete, and the 3 giant crab islands, which had been dormant for over 500 years, were finally able to fulfill their purpose.
Suddenly, Tom finds himself lying down.
But Rakshar reminded everyone, if they ran away so hastily now, he would definitely kill Lionheart next time. This was the first time such an archdemon had appeared on Earth, a real bolt from the blue. The battle inside the gates was broadcast around the world, and the entire pantheon was the center of attention. The King's Guild saved over 10,000 of the inhabitants of Krashtria, more specifically, the people of Kiruk.
And Tom can't believe that the Mirage immediately figured out it. The guy can't believe that someone could see all.
The problems began with North Korea, even though they officially renounced nuclear weapons. Last night, this state suddenly severed all communication channels with the world. Satellite surveillance of the area was suspended.
The Immortal wishes to give guidance to talented descendants. Since the boy has many talents, he definitely meets the criteria.
But now, having made a deal with the devil, they were going to become the most powerful civilization. The initiator of all this was Shellman, a famous magician from the USA. His order was simple: summon the monster.
Mirage continues. The more low-level talents, the slower the guy grows.
Covered in scars and deep wounds, the archdemon announced that he must first restore his body.
The guy didn't know this was possible.
And unfortunately, there was more than enough food here.
This time, the incarnation of the Divine Immortal will help the guy.
She already knew that archdemons could penetrate any gate, and that meant that knights might be able to do the same.
In this room, the flow of time is changed. An hour here is equal to a month in the outside world.
These carefree creatures began to build their homes both on land and in the sea. Giant crabs actively cooperated with coastal cities and even joined the Pantheon's security service. So the Kirik confidently integrated into the modern world.
The mirage disappears with the words, "If the guy is lucky, then after the monarch level he may have a chance to become worthy of beholding the immortal in the flesh." He found a suitable opponent for Tom. The guy can fight for his own pleasure.
Now she was treated not only as a knight but also as a priestess. And with this title, the girl had to accept all the responsibilities, including carrying the word of God. Moreover, Hari became an aristocrat and the third person in the pantheon after Lion and Sir Spinner. Meanwhile, a veritable storm of research was raging in Beatrice's laboratory. It turned out that demons really do use the gates.
A large city like the Demon Sea Base wakes up with the first rooster crow.
In reality, the system forced participants to rescue barbarians, trade souls, and fight against the Knights of the Holy Grail.
Hunters bring in their nightly catch for sale. Someone, to everyone's envy, managed to single-handedly bring down a silver-mooned wolf. Yulia is sleeping and calling for her brother in her sleep.
And even if the gate task seemed suspicious, most people did it anyway, mostly for the money. Although, admittedly, the people themselves weren't very smart. The king felt that the conspiracy of dark forces had already reached a critical point.
And at the same time, he fights a fierce monster for half a year. Talent of the highest level of strength shows itself well. Now the monster is getting it in no small...
The Pantheon Guild launched a massive attack on portals throughout Korea. The scale of the operation was on the level of a full-fledged army. The guild divided the fighters into 20 squads and set about clearing the gates one by one. Their speed was impressive. While other guilds typically conducted 2 raids per month, Pantheon destroyed 20 gates in just 4 days. They have effectively monopolized all portals in Korea. All raids were successful. In total, the Pantheon Guild obtained almost 4 tons of precious treasures.
This becomes the final chord of a 6-month battle. The enemy is finally defeated.
This time, the clearing of the portals was entrusted exclusively to elite units.
Tom opens his eyes to reality and breathes a sigh of relief.
And Hari and Kim were to temporarily avoid any contact with the guild. It was too dangerous. Finally, they were ready for a special mission. The queen opened the portal effortlessly. This was a beautiful job from Beatrice.
Yulia shames her brother for his sudden hugs and saccharine speeches. He readily asks, "The sister is going to go to breakfast herself."
Their enemies this time were orcs. But the allies, you will definitely be surprised. The Knights of the Holy Grail. The setting is the Valley of Liam. The task is to transport the sacred relic of Sir Zere. Surprisingly, the events unfolding before his eyes corresponded to real history. This truly impressed His Majesty. Sir Zere was a knight of the Holy Grail of dreams and death. And this task turned out to be his last. And then he never managed to complete it.
Pets also walk with their owner.
He possessed incredible abilities. He could create spaces of illusions where orcs died instantly.
The guys are impressed by the city fountain. They have never seen anything like it before.
And I was truly happy to meet God's messenger.
The brother and sister admit that they haven't relaxed as much as they did on this wonderful day in 100 years.
Lion himself was an unsurpassed warrior, having become a knight at a very young age. But before him stood an old man. Zareya had reached the limit of his capabilities.
Yulia returns home alone and grumbles that her carefree brother let her go alone.
His Majesty asked Sir Zere to report on the situation.
He simply said that he would go buy something and would be back soon, and that Yulia should go home and rest.
All forces were divided into 5 groups, each of which accompanied a relic. But Lion was only interested in one thing, where exactly the detachment with the main artifact was located. It turned out that the 5th convoy had set off to the southwest.
Fanny explains that she is an ordinary warrior, just very...
Hari and Tesso found themselves in a completely different place.
Julia asks the mouse to hide. Tom said that no one should see the animal.
The knights were confused. The task was to deliver the relic which Sir Zareya had told them about. He introduced himself as the person responsible for this mission. In addition, Tesso was made to understand clearly he would only receive the title of Knight of Dreams and Death in the future. For now, he was just a knight sent on a special mission. Zareya had not received any tasks from the gods for almost 50 years.
Yulia suggests finding a warrior skills textbook for her namesake.
Despite his strength and experience, he had no superpowers that would allow him to turn the tide of battle, unlike those who received the blessings of the gods.
Here in Tom's head, he hears Violet's frightened voice, screaming that the Yun family is here and the owner urgently needs to return.
But one day in a dream, an unfamiliar girl appeared before him. It was the goddess of dreams and death. The Pantheon finally recognized Zareya's merits. His time had come. Only at the age of 100 did Zoreya become a full-fledged knight of the Holy Grail. And now he fought side by side with King Lionheart himself. The orcs' power turned out to be unexpectedly powerful. There was even a stone troll in their ranks. His Majesty ordered his disciples to observe carefully. They had a goal to strive for. Sir Zoreya performed wonders on the battlefield, driving his horse with incredible skill.
Fanny says that it would be better to ask Julia's brother about this. She says she's just looking for a little rat who stole something from her.
Although the task involved delivering a relic, this time His Majesty decided to stay by Zoreya's side, to help and be with him until the very end. Interestingly, the warriors still haven't found a single magic stone. This task was not marred by malicious intent, like the previous ones. The gate turned out to be completely neutral. It was just impossible to change its nature. And even in such a short time, the Pantheon Guild has already gained a lot of useful information. Suddenly, a spear flew at Lion.
Tom thinks that he is the only one to blame. His sister shouldn't have returned alone. First, he sends Zolotzi to the pocket storage to recover and rest.
The Knight of the Holy Grail was delighted. He would gladly dedicate the execution of this creature to His Majesty.
Here, a gloomy Lena appears. The kidnapped Yulia is thrown into the Yun family's underground prison.
He threatened that the orcs had an army and humans would regret invading their lands. Zoreya just smiled and agreed. The orcs really managed to scrape together a bunch of soldiers. But in the end, it was just plain and pathetic garbage. The monster had a very bad premonition. And for good reason, Zoreya called on his patroness, the goddess of dreams and death, to help her faithful knight.
Lena stands above him with a needle in her hands.
Together they cleanse the entire valley of filthy creatures.
Tom opens his eyes in an unfamiliar place and realizes that he dreamed of it.
The plan was simple. Spend the night in a cave and move on in the morning.
But he is desperately trying to reconstruct the chronology of events.
Sir Zoreya confidently blocked the passage to the cave, although it was not a grail gift but an ordinary magic trick. But whatever it was, a long and dangerous night awaited them.
She would suggest thinking it over and planning, but Tom would rush straight into battle.
Hari and Tesso couldn't resist. They were eager to find out what future and past Sir Zoreya meant. It turned out that the goddess Dust had endowed the knight with a unique gift, the ability to summon a younger version of yourself from the past, the one that is still wandering in search of its path. This second version was only 85 years old, and very soon it was to receive its first task from the gods. The most interesting thing is that this copy did not take away the power of the present Zoreya. It was a separate body, pulled from the past.
With this thought, Tom gets up and tries to come to his senses. He asks what Lena did to him.
Sir Zoreya immediately ordered silence. It seems the monsters have already figured out their location. The next thing I heard was the crash of stone. The monster had broken through the ceiling and was attacking from above.
Lena sees that the poison has not yet left the body, and in this state Tom is too weak.
Their opponent was a creature of evil, and his poison killed instantly. But it was too late to run away. Tesso was injured, and poison began to penetrate his body. Hari understood perfectly well that this situation was critical. There was only one way to save Tesso and complete the mission: kill the monster. And she went to battle. That's what a young burning heart was like.
The Yuns want to expel Lena's family from the Sea Demon base, but they had no reason to do so before.
So along with fire, the blow carried the element of water. This was the technique of the sacred law, a power capable of changing the very order of the world. It was thanks to this powerful combination that Hari managed to win the brutal battle. And here's the good news. In the previous version of Sir Zoreya, an antidote was discovered made from sea crystals. However, it was only enough for one person. The knight, without hesitation, insisted that the young traveler use it. And when Tesso agreed, joy flashed in the old knight's eyes. This time, the entrance to the cave was camouflaged much better. But the poison was relentlessly destroying Zoreya. The double was getting worse and worse. But there's no need to worry. Another version of him is still alive, and he will deliver the relic. Death will be easy. Finally, the knight warned, someone has been hunting the holy relic for a long time, and to deliver it to King Lionheart, they must treat him as someone who can be lost. At that very moment, the goddess of dust appeared to the knight. At this time, the real Zoreya, knight of the goddess of dreams and death, finished the battle.
Then he orders everyone to climb into the cauldron without question.
The orcs did not even try to intervene, even in the face of such provocation.
Lena explains that this is a high-level elixir made using the family's secret technology and should not be underestimated.
Such commanders are chosen by the orc gods themselves for their incredible services to the people.
Tom clenches his teeth and climbs into the boiling vat.
But it was too early to draw conclusions now. First of all, he had to talk to Zarea personally, and then His Majesty revealed the truth of the past life. The Holy Grail Knight was stunned. It turns out he had already been to paradise.
Lena leaves and asks to let me know immediately if something happens to the guy. A flying ship appears in the sky above the air residence. The elder personally meets him in the courtyard of the residence. A majestic middle-aged man slowly descends the gangway, Zen Neo, master of spells. The elder greets Master Neo on behalf of the...
These monsters lead an extremely primitive life. They eat and fight all day, and after dinner they immediately fall asleep. It was this weakness that made them defenseless at night. That's how the king and Zarea destroyed the entire camp. Without a fight, without a chance. But even after that, Zarea's thoughts did not leave her. The world they found themselves in was a portal, and with the arrival of Lion, the story of his death changed. And that meant that the other one was already leaving. One who can match King Lionheart himself, the strongest knight of the Holy Grail. Want to know one interesting thing about the Knights of the Holy Grail? Their power does not come simply from the sword. It is a gift from the gods themselves. Divine beings whose power depends on the faith of mortals transferred their power to the chosen ones on earth through faith. And this is how the Knights of the Holy Grail transformed spiritual devotion into true divine power. These warriors never tired, and this became a real nightmare for the monsters.
This pill helps to reach the level of a monarch. Neo looks at it with a smile.
And despite all their efforts, they were unable to capture either of the two mysterious attackers.
The ancestor asks if Neo is happy with the gift.
The orc champion was furious over the losses.
Since he accepted the gift, he wonders what the ancestor wants.
But before that, another shock came. The Knights of the Holy Grail challenged the orcs to a duel. The champion immediately ordered the challenge to be accepted, and he swore that he would drag the knight's corpse away in the morning. At this very time, Queen Beatrice and the Pantheon cadets were next to another group of Zarea.
The lab technician thinks that an earthquake has started.
She understood. King Lion was with his team, and for now they had nothing to worry about. Just in case, Beatrice had activated tracking spells on everyone, so it was only a matter of time before all the groups met. But of course, not everything went smoothly.
The egg then begins to draw energy from the core of life.
Tesso and Hari were accompanying another convoy.
Clouds of energy rise above the residence.
Beatrice couldn't track him down at all. In fact, everything was much more interesting. Yapi was in orbit. He had already managed to expand his observation of the world inside the gate.
Also high levels of flight fire, healing talents, and medium levels of healer, dragon soul.
By all indications, it could have been the Knight of the Empire, Lionheart.
Tom asks what to feed him, monster meat or elixirs.
And then something impossible happened. This stranger simply looked up and ordered the robot to disappear.
The guy throws a stone, the dragon catches it in midair.
If they manage to hold off the orcs' onslaught here and now, the other knights guarding the relics will be able to complete their mission without unnecessary risks. The cadets were nervous. Some of them regretted not joining the escort groups. But Lion immediately reassured them. Beatrice and Spinner were there. These two would definitely not let them down.
The guy hears Lena running down the corridor screaming.
Zarea reported, "All fighters are fully ready for battle." And it was at this moment that the orc champion emerged from the enemy lines. The conditions of the duel were simple. The loser was considered dead. His Majesty said briefly, "Zarea must cut off the head of this arrogant monster." The knight bowed his head in agreement and firmly declared that the orc would die today.
But Tom cannot reveal the secret of the dragon's presence.
One powerful blow from the orc.
Tom thanks the lab assistant for the elixir. Lena asks Tom to go have lunch and rest. She needs to return.
But their champion suddenly froze. He couldn't even move. It was a trap. Zarea, the Knight of the Lady Death, activated the divine power, the dimension of dreams. If his sword reaches an orc, he will instantly fall victim to the power of death. But the plan didn't work, and it's no wonder this orc was considered the most dangerous of the entire army.
A box flies at his head but freezes in the air before it reaches him.
The champion's blow was terrible. The wound was bleeding non-stop.
Right now you can go and save Yulia.
Zarea fought not only as a knight, but as a fanatic of his faith.
Lena asks not to worry, the route has already been thought out. The Yun family set a trap, but Air organizes a countermove.
His blows were filled with fierce hatred for everything related to orcs. But still, they were not successful. And finally, the orc's axe cut through his defenses. Wound has appeared on Zoraya's body. Even for me, it is hard to look at it. Let's go back a little, to the events that took place before the Great War to subdue the orcs. It was then that Lion first met Zoraya, a simple knight seeking the support of the gods. The protagonist said that the main goal of the campaign was to destroy the orc champion, and he admitted this might be too difficult a task for an ordinary knight.
And he finds the place where Yulia is being held. The sensations at the Grandmaster level seem 10 times stronger than they were before.
Lion couldn't understand why this man was so eager to fight.
He feels like a mouse in a mousetrap.
He just wanted to live life to the fullest, honestly, brightly, and in his own way. Now, already in battle, the orc shouted that victory would be his.
But he didn't detect the security guard's spatial talent, which means he uses some kind of device.
He silently begged his goddess for blessings.
Tom is surprised that such a strong warrior was assigned to simple. Yulia sees her brother through the bars.
And this time everything changed. Zoraya's blade cut through the body of the orc champion, and he fell. The knight of Lady Jabella finally won. Then another enemy entered the field, Orc, the god spellcaster.
Saying that this is their first official meeting, Fanny stands against the backdrop of the moon.
But the knight already felt that his time was almost up. Despite this, he was determined to take another enemy with him to the afterlife. But His Majesty ordered him to stop. Lion blessed his final journey and shouted to his enemies that he had given them their only chance. But now it's all over. His strength, the strength of a demigod, was simply incredible. And no one doubted anymore. The Lion King is the greatest in the entire history of mankind. He stayed by Zoraya's side until the very end. The king wanted the knight to accept the Ascension ceremony, and so it happened. Lion kept his promise. The Lady of Death came personally to guide her faithful warrior on his final journey, and Lionheart solemnly promised Zoraya's name would live forever, and his soul would drink wine at the banquets of the gods. That was how he said goodbye to an old friend. But while the people were saying goodbye to their hero, the orcs were preparing to kill King Lionheart. Meanwhile, a new face joined the group accompanying the true relic. Sir Zoraya, who everyone thought was dead, was reborn as a younger version of himself. He was only 87 again, the days when he was a knight-errant and Lion was just beginning his journey in the Holy Grail. All the warriors of the Pantheon couldn't wait to find out what Lion was like in his youth, and he was the youngest Holy Grail knight in history, with an impeccable reputation. At first, he was supposed to be an ordinary volunteer of the Royal Order, but his status as a descendant of a duke opened a direct path to the top for him. And yet, Lion fully justified all his titles. He single-handedly destroyed orc villages and destroyed entire ranks of heretics. Even Kobzars composed ballads about the young knight-errant. At 27, he became the youngest knight of the Holy Grail. Then he truly shone, brightly and fearlessly. And no one since has been able to match his strength and courage. Zoraya turned to Hari. He wanted her to remain under His Majesty's care and study with him. The girl had incredible talent, and Zoraya saw in her a blessing from above. His words made Tesso think. That same night he took up the sword, he trained until he was exhausted. And Zoraya, noticing this, immediately recognized the technique of the royal sword. He became curious about what the young man was capable of, and so their duel began. Zoraya's blows were merciless. Tesso had no chance, but that didn't matter. It contained the main thing, reaction, basics, and self-improvement. He sincerely tried. After the fight, Tesso asked if there was any difference between him and Hari, and she was huge. Hari had a talent that could not be acquired through training, and Tesso himself understood this perfectly well. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't reach her. And yet Zoraya saw a similarity between them. Yes, in the future he would become a knight of the Holy Grail, but for now it was just a dream. Everyone, His Majesty, the Lady of Dreams, said he had better surrender, but he didn't listen. For him, someone else's opinion didn't matter, because a true knight is one who doesn't stop. He must not be afraid, he must believe, love, and invest with all his heart, especially the Grail Knight. The next day, they finally reached the gates of the Empire. Tesso already wanted it all to end. The task dragged on, and the border doors should have been opened long ago. Zero was amazed. The Empire's wizards were already waiting, and monsters began to approach them from the mountains. The magicians had sly smiles on their faces, and as soon as Zoraya took a step forward, a single spell killed him. The wizards were sincerely happy to have guests on their land, and then they smiled and wished them a safe journey. The warriors instantly understood everything. The Empire had long collaborated with the orcs and simply wanted to capture the relics. Their true goal is to explore the power of the rules, or rather magic. And although it was considered blasphemy, the magicians of the Empire were completely indifferent. They sought to prove that human magic could surpass anything. The great lightning spell flew from the sky at the Knights of the Holy Grail, but someone stopped him. Yes, it was Beatrice. She sensed that her little friends were in danger and immediately appeared. It seemed that now the battle would take a completely different turn. The magicians noticed that the girl had a magical aura, but she was also enveloped by divine energy. In addition, this impudent beauty radiated such a power of seduction as if she had stepped out of the window of a brothel. Beatrice, of course, apologized, but that was her natural gift. The magicians simply couldn't believe that behind that puppet face was hidden such crazy energy. In any case, they attacked. They believed that no one could withstand the power of the Empire. But Her Majesty stopped their attack, not without difficulty, of course. And then she responded with a series of powerful spells. She combined magic with divine power to destroy this handful of possessed. They were so blinded by their magic that they didn't even see its true power. And then Beatrice cast the great magic spell. Meanwhile, Sir Zorea came to his senses. Even younger than before, he already knew everything. The Empire had betrayed Lionheart. Beatrice ordered reinforcements to be called immediately. It was only a matter of time before the magicians were contained, because they exuded some disturbing alien energy. And just then, but in a different place, Sir Spinner landed on the ground. His body and system were seriously damaged. Urgent repairs were needed. But before he could survey the situation, he was grabbed by an unfamiliar knight. He was interested in something strange. Why divine energy flowed from this work? The group guarding the true relic was fleeing the gorge. They needed to run as fast as possible to call for reinforcements. But the young cadets of the Pantheon were very worried. The Empire was already literally on its heels, and it was not going to give up. The attacks rained down mercilessly, hitting the warriors directly with purpose. The Imperial soldiers were incredibly strong. But the Knights of the Holy Grail had no intention of surrendering just like that. Teso was under the sights of a fearsome werewolf knight, and Stella, who worked in a team with Zorea, decided to stay behind. Its purpose is to protect the relic. Together with Zorea, she rushed into battle to stop one of the most dangerous opponents. Their sacrifice paid off. The other knights managed to escape, taking the relic with them. One of the Imperial warriors exploded with rage. He shouted that they were all just fanatics, a blind herd without a will of their own, and vowed to destroy each and every one of them. At this moment, Zorea was reborn again, even younger, even less experienced. But even in the body of a young man, he was not going to back down. Before him stood the fearsome knight of the Empire. But the boy looked death straight in the eyes. He turned to Lady Death, sincerely wishing to defeat not only his enemy, but also himself. The goddess Dust was delighted. Her little knight had once again proven that he was not afraid of the impossible. She promised to take care of him, helping him through time, space, and pain. Zorea was not immortal, but that was precisely why he could transcend death. And this time victory was to be his. The Knight of the Empire couldn't believe that the wandering warriors had just almost killed him. If he had turned into a demon then, he would have been dead by now. Without wasting a second, he ordered his subordinates to pursue the bastards. The relic had to be returned at any cost, even if it meant sacrificing everything. But only one person remained alive on the battlefield, Stella. She stood among the ruins in fire, teeth clenched. And as soon as she exclaimed, "Glory to Lionheart!" a terrible sound was heard in the sky. It wasn't just a comet flying at them. He was the Punisher, the Executioner, the Witch Hunter, and the Horseman of Destruction, a messenger from the gods themselves. His name was Vulcanus. He didn't ask, he didn't explain. He just coldly ordered the Imperials to come up with an excuse before he destroyed their souls. His blows were not just physical, each one carried the truth. He revealed that the Empire only existed because Lionheart allowed it to. With each word he spoke, the force became more devastating. And the enemy, even though he was an experienced warrior, could not withstand these superhuman blows. In desperation, the Imperial Knight turned to Knua, the Dark God. He prayed for strength and instantly turned into a demon. His attitude towards the world changed, and a voice spoke, "One prayer, and they are already stronger than humanity." But Vulcanus didn't even listen to him. He simply summoned the sacred fire. At the same time, a heavy battle was raging at the Empire's outpost. Beatrice continued to hold back the onslaught of wizards, holding on to the edge. Fortunately, Lion came to her aid. He showed up at just the right moment. But before they could discuss further action, another meteorite fell from the sky. But this time Lion was glad, for inside the fiery strike was the same knight he once knew well. Vulcanus destroyed all the evil around him with God's punishment, leaving behind only ashes. After the battle, the knight knelt down before King Lionheart. Lion would have liked to talk to him longer. They were old friends, but there was no time. They needed to hurry to the gate. Lion asked Vulcanus to leave something behind, a thing that symbolized his power, and the knight gave him this gift. The king promised that they would definitely meet again, because Vulcanus was not in paradise and therefore he was still alive. Finally, all the knights gathered at the portal, and they didn't just gather, they were able to preserve the holy relic. It was not easy, but thanks to joint efforts, the mission was accomplished. When His Majesty opened the case, he froze. It turned out that all this time the lost relic had been hiding within the portal, and now, finally, it had returned to its true owner. Shortly after this event, a treasure appraiser arrived at the Pantheon Guild. What she saw stunned her. The scale, the artifacts, the very atmosphere of the place were completely beyond the ordinary. Hari, as always, showed up on time. She saved her colleague from Spinner, who continued to collect fees from newcomers, inventing new excursions. So the appraiser madam finally got to Lion. The king and queen looked like a real royal couple. Lion decided to show her the most valuable thing he had collected. Madame was amazed. In front of her were legendary items, the axe of an orc champion, and magical artifacts. But the most impressive was the ceremonial dagger of Vulcanus. But the last and most important was the artifact from the last mission, an epic-class scabbard. More precisely, the scabbard of Richard the Lionheart himself. The protagonist immediately understood everything. He drew his sword and something unusual began, a strange, almost mystical process of reunion. The words of instruction left by the first King Lionheart echoed in his head. Rush to the stars, don't stop at obstacles. Do good with courage. Even if the heavens fall, restore justice. Love brightly like a star and make your destiny shine. Lion immediately went out onto the balcony. Before all the people, he officially addressed the sky, calling on the holy relic to awaken. And the magic came to life. He felt the strength of his glorious days returning to him. Without delay, Lion ordered Beatrice to prepare for the grand ceremony. Because now that he had the scabbard, it was time to put the big plan into action. The Knights of the Holy Grail were already ready. And Lion will fulfill his duty. He will summon the star. Meanwhile, one of the Pantheon cadets has planned something dangerous. To kill one boy, she needed divine abilities. He was last seen in Vietnam, still fighting the demon sword. But while this story was only gaining momentum, everything was going as usual in the Pantheon Guild itself. Training never stopped for a single day. Different types of battles, strategies, and attacks were continuously practiced. And as practice has shown, these methods really worked. Everyone who passed through His Majesty's school left there a true hero. After the king's address, the cadets went to lunch. There, they immediately began discussing the initiation ceremony, which was to take place very soon. This ritual was supposed to establish their connection with the gods. But choosing wasn't so easy. After all, everyone had the right to believe in the one they felt closest to. They were surprised by how different these beliefs were. For example, Sir Spinner was under the protection of the god Thetos. But His Majesty served two at once, the goddess Ariana and the god of war. This is what caused doubts among the cadets, how to choose their own. But the dinner noise suddenly died down. The loudspeaker announced that one of the young knight's parents had arrived. Kim immediately frowned and silently headed towards the main hall. He didn't understand why his mother had come, but he felt that the matter was serious. And he was not mistaken. She reported that one of the most powerful guilds in Korea had summoned him to serve. The offer was attractive. Prestige, fame, new opportunities. But the mother did not hide her excitement. There was a question in her eyes. Would he really betray his father? Will he join the pack of blasphemers who despise everything they believed in? His Majesty devoted a lot of time to his cadets, and now he decided to explain one of the most difficult topics, the difference between the gods of the Pantheon and the rest of the deities. But for the students, this question turned out to be not an easy one, because comparing gods is almost blasphemy. Beatrice voiced her own theory. The difference is that some gods are real and others are fictional. But she had no evidence. Others tried to talk about miracles, about how His Majesty saw the gods with his own eyes, but all those versions were rejected. Only Zhang got closer to the truth. She believed that the gods of the pantheon were truly responding. They hear prayers, intervene in events, perform miracles, and thereby prove their presence. But even she admitted that God had never answered her directly. Lion was tired of theories and firmly declared that everyone was wrong. And just as he was speaking, thunder ripped through the sky and rain poured from the clouds. The protagonist explained that ordinary people believe that all they have to do is pray and the gods will grant everything. But he prayed for rain and didn't ask for it to fall on him. The cadets were surprised to notice that Lion remained dry while the rain flooded everything around. The reason is simple. The gods protected their king. They did not let even a drop fall on his head. That is why, according to Lion, you should not expect the gods to unconditionally fulfill every wish. Faith is a choice, and it doesn't necessarily have to be tied to the pantheon. But at the same time, His Majesty warned one should beware of false prophets, those who put a price on faith. After the lecture, the cadets went to the prayer room to commune with the gods. Meanwhile, Lion was thinking about something else. He had a long journey ahead of him. At this moment, he only had 3 Holy Grail nights. It was necessary to awaken at least a few more. Hari had the best chance. But another problem was that the 2 cadets had become interested in the most dangerous gods of the pantheon. And it didn't smell good anymore. A few days later, a group of men armed with microphones and speakers broke into the pantheon. These were representatives of the Palace of Light. They launched a real sonic attack, shouting that the path to heaven was only possible through faith in the dragon god. Their cries were accompanied by calls for the heretics to leave their land. But it didn't last long. The yacht spinner arrived at the noise. He clearly didn't like the fact that the noise level exceeded all standards. He politely asked to stop the protest, but was ignored. Then a barrage of insults rained down on him. The men mocked him, calling him a soulless machine possessed by a demon. And here Yappy couldn't take it anymore. He activated his divine tactical technique. And now it was he who was driving these fanatics out of the pantheon. Sir Spinner was extremely dissatisfied with the behavior of the guests. He warned them they should never return here again. But it was too late. The spies of the Palace of Light had accomplished their mission. They recorded everything that happened on a hidden camera, so now the world will see a crazy robot attacking people. However, everything did not go according to plan. While they were preparing an information attack, revelations about the guild itself appeared on the front pages, but there was not a single bad word about Pantheon. The situation has changed dramatically. The video had not yet been distributed when the spies' computers went down. Someone destroyed their server. While the enemies were looking for the culprits, Pantheon had already managed to cover up the traces. Meanwhile, one of the cadets was heading home. Kim did everything as asked, but now he was full of doubts. After all, he recently met the god of the Pantheon himself, and this meeting changed everything. As soon as Kim crossed the threshold, his mother met him. But God spoke of only one thing. He ordered the disciple to subject her to heavenly punishment. It was a test, cruel but necessary. From that moment on, thoughts of it never left Kim, neither during dinner nor on lonely walks in the park. God has said again and again these heretics are wicked, lying blasphemers. And it doesn't matter who she is to him. The guy didn't understand why him. Why did the God of Heaven and Thunder choose him for such a mission? How can he destroy an entire cult if his own mother is there? And then His Majesty's voice sounded in my head. Lion already knew everything. After the conflict broke out in the main building, he was told everything. The king came to talk in person. He turned to God and asked directly, why was the burden of heavenly punishment placed on a young cadet? The deity insisted that the boy should teach the heretics a lesson with his own hands. But Lion didn't understand why Kim was silent, especially since the cult recently tried to disrupt the Pantheon. And Sir Spinner didn't hesitate. He answered immediately. After all, the Palace of Light had effectively declared war on the gods. Kim began to get nervous. He screamed for his mother, begged her not to touch him. But Lion was not a madman who destroyed everything in a row. The king promised he would bring the guilty to justice. All you have to do is show them where their base is. The history of the Palace of Light began many years ago. Their leader, Mr. Park, was just 12 years old when he experienced a disaster that changed his life forever. In those dark times, there was no order or rules. Everyone survived as best they could. That's how he became an A-rank hunter, tempered by experience and pain. His encounter with God took place in the unstable gate several years later. Then, due to a sudden complication, Pak lost his entire team. Finding himself in a death trap, he heard a voice. The one who spoke showed mercy. And at that moment, the 7th S-rank fighter appeared on the Korean hunter scene. It was from that moment that Park began to preach faith in the God who had saved his life. Miracles began to occur around the Palace of Light, and these were not isolated cases. Miracles happened again and again, so even the Hunters Association was forced to acknowledge the power of this guild. Glory and faith grew. Pak enjoyed the attention, considering himself a conduit between humans and the gods. He said that 2 hunters received strength from God in exchange for a sacrifice, and he called on others to prove their loyalty. After all, according to him, for those who believe nothing is impossible. And suddenly he noticed 2 strangers among the crowd. I felt immediately that these were messengers of the Pantheon. Beatrice was already nervous. She knew that His Majesty could not tolerate sectarians who played on the poverty of ordinary people and shattered their faith. But Park decided to do it his own way. He invited guests to the stage. And then Lion made a move in response. He pulled out a bag of money, threw it at the pastor's feet, and ordered, "Perform a miracle." After all, it was Park who claimed that even for a small sacrifice, God is capable of the impossible. So maybe it's not about God at all. The pastor exploded. He began shouting that respect should not be given to God, but to him, his representative, that everyone must obey him. But Lion could not understand how a mortal pastor dared to equate himself with a bishop. Puck couldn't stand it. He called out to the crowd, and they responded. They shouted, calling Lion a heretic, a demon, a monster. The king endured most of the insults with calm dignity. But there were things he would never forgive. First, it was an insult to his parents. It was disrespect for the entire family. Secondly, blasphemy. Mortals are not allowed to mock the gods. And thirdly, the comparison with a demon. That was too much. The king could no longer hold back. He thundered, "They will see heavenly punishment for their audacity. The light of the divine star will purify everything." And now the earth was preparing to face destruction. Beatrice curtly ordered Yapi to get ready. Just a moment more and everything will be revealed before our eyes. His Majesty looked up and in one motion destroyed the ceiling of the building, above which the star was already hanging. It was Mickey's comet, a celestial ball of colossal weight capable of crushing all life. But the main thing was not her, but the fact that the protagonist was going to use the divine power. All this magic flew rapidly upwards, straight towards the star. And it was at that moment that Puck and his god realized that things were bad. And not just bad ones, it was the real end. The comet hovered over the Palace of Light. Now all that remained was to finish the job, to deal with the main blasphemer. Lion called Kim to see everything with his own eyes. The boy immediately recognized the creature that was poisoning his father's mind. She was standing next to her mother, still the same parasite. And it was with him that the god of thunder wanted to get even. He entrusted this task personally to Kim. The boy was trembling with fear for his parents. But inside another state was already maturing. Trust. He simply had to let go of his fear and accept God's will. It was just an impulse, sincere, strong, uncontrollable. And then the power of the thunder god filled him. Kim was able to break the shackles that held his parents and freed them from the parasite's influence. For the first time in a long time, the boy's heart was filled with peace. But Lion is not finished yet. The leader of the Palace of Light, Pak, remained ahead. But now the situation was completely under His Majesty's control. This creature is the spawn of the archdemon of greed. He promised salvation to hundreds of people, lying to them with a smile. But the moment has come when he will have to save his own skin. After that, all the news exploded with headlines. The Palace of Light was destroyed. The sectarians managed to draw a lot of people into their game, gain influence and power. But the meteorite's fall on the building caused a lot of problems. Without wasting time, Pak publicly announced that the Palace of Light intended to merge with the Pantheon. He launched a campaign to promote Lion as God's messenger, a perfectly staged show. His Majesty, meanwhile, was closely monitoring the situation. It was necessary to begin work immediately. The priority was to forge armor and swords from the star. But first, official consent from the authorities. So Park arranged a meeting with the Minister of Science and Technology. The goal is to confirm that the rights to the meteorite belong to the Lion King. The authorities complied. They promised to take care of all legal and tax issues. Of course, not out of kindness. There are always nuances in such matters. However, His Majesty, without hesitation, agreed to give part of the meteorite as a gift to the President himself. The deal was made, but the minister had something else important, for Lion personally. It was a video from Vietnam taken straight from the battlefield. It has the Wandering Demon sword on it. Its owner, John Ji-ho, has just left for the Japanese archipelago. The situation was serious and a response was needed immediately. The strongest guilds gathered together. Everything was organized by the head of the Divine Sword Guild, Old Master John Jisoo. He was going to kill Ji-ho, and so he decided to warn everyone. But the meeting took an unexpected turn when important guests arrived. His Majesty personally entered the hall, and instantly a silent battle of glances broke out between the old king and Lion. Without hesitating for a second, the protagonist was the first to challenge, and ordered the leader to vacate his place at the negotiating table. The first sword of Korea, a living legend, John Jinsu. His names, titles, and invaluable contributions to the country's development made him an untouchable elder, almost a shrine. His authority and power broke even the character of the Divine Sword Guild head. But the Lion King didn't care. Standing before him was just another young man. Fortunately, the head of the Hunters Association told Jong in time that His Majesty would hit as many as 300 this year. It's all about the power of the Holy Grail which prevented its knights from aging. Only then did the king finally smile. His time was more valuable than gold, so the surprise of everyone in the room immediately faded into the background, and the president of the association began his report. 13 years ago, the Black Gate opened in London. No hunting team could overcome them. They were so heavy. The European Union remembered the disaster in Shanghai and immediately sent 24 S-rank hunters, along with almost 2,000 A and B-rank warriors. The chief mage of the Time Tower led the cleanup. The battle lasted almost 2 months, but they finally succeeded. It was the first successful capture of the Black Gate in history. But the real problem started later. Shortly after the cleanup, an epic sword appeared, Overkill. The British government won the bid for these weapons, paying a lot of money. It was used by the best sword masters of modern times. But things went off the rails when he was handed over to James of the Gentlemen's Guild. What happened next turned into a disaster. About 800,000 civilians died. James was destroyed, but his vessel, the Demon Sword, escaped. Since then, the whole world has tried to stop the next chosen ones. 4 years ago, the sword appeared in Korea. It was taken possession of by Swordmaster John Ji-ho, the son of the head of the Divine Sword Guild, and also the father of John So-yeon, who now serves in the Pantheon. That's why the first sword's request was short and clear. Keep his grandson as far away from this matter as possible. Now it's worth paying attention to John So-yeon. She lived in Pantheon, where she trained with other cadets. But at night, nightmares would haunt her. Again and again she would see the demon sword in her own father's hands. In those dreams he killed everyone she loved, and then silently he went to get her. Eventually the girl could no longer live with it. But these dreams were not only a burden for her. They made her believe that this time everything would be different, that now she would have a chance to change something. She had already made a deal with the god of the Pantheon himself. The protagonist, as always, sternly warned the cadets, no deals with deities. But John took a different path, and only Beatatrice, one of the most daring gods, agreed to her desperate proposal. He didn't trust her, and the girl understood that. However, despite his doubts, he still decided to give her power. John wanted more than anything to become a knight of the Holy Grail. But God proved to be no less audacious than his covenants. He bluntly said that the girl wasn't even up to par to stand next to King Lionheart, and she doesn't see herself replacing the Avenger of the Gods. Beatatrice saw neither strength nor dignity in her, but he offered his help anyway, because he knew her thirst for revenge was stronger than fear. After she had carried out her revenge, her soul would irrevocably belong to the god of the Pantheon. While Jong was making dangerous deals, King Lion was busy forming the association's special legion. The composition was to include the 4 strongest cadets who met all of His Majesty's expectations. Among the chosen ones was Hari, one of the most talented of all. For her efforts and strength, she received a special gift, a sword, a spear, and light armor. All of this was created by the hands of Sir Spinner himself, so that the girl could fully realize her potential. Her equipment received the blessings of the gods Thetos and Pomi. They filled the gifts with their power. A similar honor fell to Cadet Kim. The god of lightning wished that his disciple would become a just judge, capable of mercilessly punishing the enemies of King Lionheart. When the time came, John, His Majesty told her about the request of her grandfather, the first sword of Korea. He asked to keep his granddaughter as far away from this dangerous mission as possible. But Lion himself saw that the girl didn't just want to participate, she had to. The god Byzantium blessed her gift, imbuing it with darkness, destruction, and a thirst for retribution. Only this power could fulfill her wish. And then the Lion King himself intervened. As a mentor, he wanted to protect his students and wanted only the best for them. The goddess Ariana herself appeared before Chang. Her appearance was dazzling. A gentle, warm light illuminated the girl. Ariana said that John was a lost lamb, and her light would show the way to salvation. The goddess was only fulfilling the wishes of her faithful knight Lion. But Byzantium didn't like it. The god of darkness accused the king of being too soft on people. And although Lion listened silently, both knew the reason. He was the king of men. Byzantium suddenly reminded him of the daughter Lion had lost. Was this tenderness also connected to her? After that, he focused his gaze on the heir to the Lionheart. God reminded him that all great kings had gained glory in darkness, not in light. But Lion remembered it well. But to Chan, Vasanti spoke differently. He asked not to forget her old wish, looking at the sunbeam. After all, even the smallest avenger will be able to carry out his revenge, but only in the cold darkness, not in the light. Meanwhile, in another part of the world, the head of the Japanese Hunters Association was not at all in the mood for spiritual revelations. This self-confident guy, resembling a bright brazen rooster, only dreamed of power. He was pleased that the influence of the royal forces was gradually weakening. Japan, from his point of view, had long been his personal kingdom. Yes, the pantheon was intimidating. But the Japanese hunters considered themselves much stronger than the Koreans. And Kamiya, the head of the association, already had a plan. He was ready to do anything to eliminate competitors and remain the sole leader. And after this great operation, his kingdom was to become perfect. When the Pantheon delegation arrives, they will throw a lavish party so that they will believe that the Japanese are the real leaders. All Japanese delegates were warned in advance. Lion is not just a high-born guest. He should be received as if the emperor himself were arriving. And when the guests got off the plane, it became obvious that this was no exaggeration. The Lion King impressed not only with his elegance, but also with his true grandeur. He was a figure you wouldn't find among modern monarchs. He didn't just wear a crown, he was its embodiment. He was met by the Japanese Prime Minister himself, and even that seemed insufficient. But the leader's conversation was suddenly interrupted. Kamiya appeared, and from the first word he began to criticize his own government, trying to present himself as the only worthy leader. He smugly extended his hand to His Majesty. But the Lion King is not one to touch commoners without reason. He coldly ordered this rooster to be taken away. However, another one intervened, an S-rank hunter. The young man was clearly angry at seeing how rudely his leader had been treated. But Lion was not required to know all the famous common people, even those of rank S. He subtly hinted, if a dog behaves rudely, it's not its fault. It's the owner's fault. And it is the owner who should be responsible for this. Everyone around was speechless. No one could even imagine how to react to what had just happened. But the skirmish was interrupted. The situation suddenly escalated. An urgent message has arrived. The wandering demon sword has just been spotted. Its owner, like a thunderstorm, flew right over the sea, riding this cursed artifact. At that moment, John Ji Ho tore apart space. A portal opened in front of him. Several sea monsters burst out of it at once. He needed Jeon So-yeon, and he assembled an entire underwater hell to take her away. The news of the Dragon Palace gate being breached instantly stunned everyone. According to preliminary data, as soon as the demon sword entered the portal, it immediately released monsters. The hunters refused to believe it. It seemed impossible. But Leon only coldly objected. If the system allows, the portal can be opened artificially. The president of the Hunters Association immediately demanded a full report. Beatrice and Jack Spiner took up the case. They told how it all started 4 weeks ago, when they first encountered the system while clearing the gate with the Americans. Already then, doubts arose. The tasks she was giving were too suspicious. And then they realized, the gates don't just appear. They can be induced artificially. But whatever the truth, everyone now had one goal, to stop the demon sword's breakthrough. The problem was that the artifact and its carrier were too strong. The operation to neutralize Mech has officially begun. The plan was simple. 3 main interception groups were to take up positions in different cities. The Korean side had already warned about the landing of the monsters and the sword itself. They appeared to be attacked from the air, and that's when contact was lost. However, the most alarming situation was with the team of Takeda, the same Japanese hunter. They couldn't get in touch. Something terrible was happening in the area where they were. Even the cameras didn't have time to record anything. But some of the fragments made it clear. One of the monsters had been torn apart from the inside. It seemed that Zhang had infiltrated the creature's body to remain unnoticed during the landing. And that's not all. Another battle group was completely destroyed. The situation was rapidly becoming critical. But once the Korean forces joined the Takeda group, the balance of power was balanced. There were enough S&A ranks, it seemed like a chance had appeared. But then the head of the Phoenix Guild suddenly turned pale. He felt something. A spooky sound, the crunch of metal on asphalt. His heart stopped. From the darkness emerged one who brings only chaos, the Duke of Carnage, Akasha, the swordsman who announced the beginning of the war. His goal was simple, to destroy all life. All the fighters instantly prepared for the attack. They had only felt such unstoppable power from the Lion King himself. Who was this freak? John effortlessly cut down several warriors in one fell swoop. His technique and power were simply beyond the limit. He was supposed to take Takeda's blow next, but he was covered in time. The Korean fighter hit him with a hammer. And then a jet of fire hit. This was enough to distract Jun a little. But he easily repelled the attack, with just one hand, and even managed to throw in the fact that his opponent was weak. The situation seemed hopeless until the first sword of Korea appeared. His skill saved everyone, and although they had already seen strong opponents, this time was completely different. The opponent was simply a monster. Furthermore, the wounds left by the demonic sword were not treatable. The buffs that strengthened the enemy were on par with Archdemon Rakshara, or perhaps even superior to him. John Jinsu understood well the only way out was to kill the bastard, and it was then that Akasha recognized him as a relative. He asked where his granddaughter had gone. These words only fueled hatred in the first sword. The old man proclaimed that his son would die that day, at the hands of his own father. The Blade of Light courage reawakened the strength in the warriors. But Akasha, the demon's puppet, was not going to give in. He summoned his sword of miscellany, and now the old man was facing real death. At this time, the plane with the Pantheon cadets was already flying to the epicenter of the events. Tension was mounting. Miss Zhang was especially nervous. Was she ready for such a meeting? But fate didn't give her time to think. The plane shook violently. A flash of the sword of various Akashis simply burst through the sky. The evil force revealed its true essence. But this story couldn't just end like that. At the most crucial moment, someone intervened in the fight. It was Jeon So-yeon, determined to protect her grandfather. Finally, the Avenger entered the battle, and with the strength of the soul that supported him, his power only grew. Jeon believed she could handle the power of her enemy. Her attacks seemed clumsy, but the power of God burned within her, and it was she who forced her opponent to be on his guard, even for a moment. Yet to the bearer of the demonic sword she remained worthless, an ordinary child, unworthy of attention. The Knights of the Pantheon immediately rushed to protect the girl, but before they could get close, the unexpected happened. A wave of blood swept across the field and knocked everyone off their feet. None of them survived. The warrior with the demonic sword considered all mortals fools who did not understand their doom, considering himself the immortal master of life and death. But suddenly a roar of laughter broke the silence. It was the leader of the Phoenix Guild. He found it ridiculous that anyone could still consider themselves superior to others. He saw nothing special about this self-proclaimed immortal, especially next to the figure standing directly in front of him, next to someone who didn't recognize any exceptions. Before King Lionheart, everyone was equal, all mortals. This moment awakened an old legend. The world was once one. There existed a great kingdom, under the protection of the gods, with knights who faithfully served the higher powers. But his existence haunted the demons, who decided to destroy him. Then 4 of the 7 Lords of Chaos came to Earth. Their appearance led to the destruction of most of the world. Only 2 peoples survived. The Orcs, who took the war as a holiday, and the Knights, who united into a common army for the last battle. During the final battle, Akash was torn from reality. He never found out how it all ended. But very soon he had to realize how much luck it was for him. Lion didn't need much preparation. His first blow was so powerful, which threw the demon sword's wielder away like a soulless toy. The first sword of Korea couldn't believe how strong this man was. But the enemy, even after falling, was not going to give up. He laughed at the efforts of mortals and showered insults, claiming that it was all in vain. A multitude of buffs were instantly applied, similar to those that once belonged to Archdemon Rakshar. However, Lion did not let the darkness break him. His steps became symbols of resistance. Even the ground he walked on remained cleansed of evil. No one could deny that a hero from legends stood before them, the one who was not afraid of evil, the one who was ready to fight to the end, and only his holy sword could match the power of Akasha himself. His blows sparkled with light in the very midst of the darkness, and every movement was like a signal that hope was still alive. The Knights of the Holy Grail went on a long journey, and only after its completion were they chosen by God himself. Each was given 3 sacred relics: armor, weapons, and most importantly, the holy sword. But it was this last relic that had special power. She was not just a weapon. She became the guardian of the Grail. Only those who received the title of Lionheart and attained the status of a demigod had the right to guard this shrine. King Lion was not the embodiment of the power of the gods. He was their leader, the bearer of divine will. His sword, the Sword of the Lionheart, was forged by the god Hito himself, tempered in the fires of Thetos, and its blade consumed by the light of the goddess Ariana. All the gods of the pantheon blessed this weapon, which was called the Sword of the Northern Lights. Akasha understood. Although he was standing before an ordinary person, he needed to be destroyed as quickly as possible, before Lion had time to reveal his true potential. But His Majesty's glory has long since become immortal, and his power worthy of the gods themselves. A single blow turned the demon into a pitiful shadow. He roared angrily, claiming that the king had weakened and was no longer equal to the terrible power he once possessed. Akasha knew the reason. There were too few believers on this earth. Lion did not deny this, but he believed that even the remnant of strength he had left was enough to destroy a being like Akasha. Despite the king's temporary weakness, the demon still had no advantage over him. Anger bubbled within the creature. It could not bear such humiliation, so without hesitation it rushed into the attack. But His Majesty was not going to back down. He carefully gathered the remnants of the holy power, as if every crumb was worth the weight of the world. Akasha finally realized that he could not defeat his enemy alone. Lion was also surprised why there weren't any of his monsters next to the demon yet. But this pause did not last long. Very soon an entire army appeared. Lion wasn't going to let Akasha escape again. The demon regretted only one thing. If he had had a little more time to accumulate strength, he could have turned this entire world into a haven for demons. But there was no more chance. Sir Spinner struck at once at the entire enemy mass, destroying everything in his path. Beatrice turned to nature, calling down lightning bolts that struck enemies from the heavens. Hari and his own squad were already standing ready to clear the battlefield to the last monster. Akasha was furious. 4 months ago, the hunchback had confirmed the existence of Lionheart, but the demon could not understand how this man had been able to gather an army in such a short time. His Majesty had no doubt that the time had come to destroy all enemies. In the end, what they feared happened. The demon sword was able to escape, although the cadets, who had just been knighted, were also filled with fighting spirit. They were able to easily deal with the demon sword monsters, but they were unable to stop Akasha from reaching the gate. But His Majesty had already prepared a plan in case the demon escaped. The king prematurely cut off the hand of the Grand Duke of Miscellany. With this, Beatrice will open the portal, and evil will realize that they will get him even in the lair. The king and Chlorola's laughter, tinged with hatred, sounded terrible. The party in honor of the great victory began this evening. Most of the cadets were having fun in the main hall. However, John So-yeon was sad on the balcony. The girl thought about her father's words and that this was not the end. Vasantes agreed that this was only the beginning, but this enemy was beyond Jong's control. Akasha had incredible abilities, and compared to him, the girl was weak. However, there is a way out even when strength is not enough. John said that she has nothing more to give to God. Byzantis tricked the girl into not having to pay if she killed the archdemon. Unexpectedly, Lion intervened in the conversation and ordered the girl to be released. He warned that any force that could force her to deviate from the righteous path could be costly. But that didn't mean Miss Sowen had to give up on revenge. Lion asked her to think about who he was, who was called the Avenger of the Gods. Byzantis confirmed and advised June to follow in the king's footsteps. After all, this man lost his people, his comrades, his country, and his flock. And it is he who desires revenge more than anyone. and Lion lived only for revenge. He fought alone for 200 years to avenge everything he had lost. It was Lion who was the great avenger who achieved an impossible victory. The protagonist was not going to forbid Zhang from taking revenge. On the contrary, he approved of it. Soen didn't understand why then. Lion said that revenge is sweet, but it must be pursued in cold blood. If Zhang dedicates himself solely to revenge, it will eat away at her soul. His Majesty asked directly who she wanted revenge on, her father who killed her mother and friend, or herself for being chosen by the demon sword. The girl started crying and saying that she was the cause of all the troubles. But the target could have been the victim, not the perpetrator. Besides, she couldn't even choose a target for revenge properly. John wondered if she really should have killed the archdemon. This was the right way to take revenge. 10 days later, the Pantheon gathered again to attack the demon. The Japanese warrior Twakedi was curious to see His Majesty in battle. However, something crazy was happening inside the gate. After all, the hunters forgot that in front of them was a king from the Middle Ages. However, it is worth remembering the events that occurred a few hours before. When the Legion entered the territory of Grand Duke Rizni, the effectiveness of all abilities decreased by 80%. His Majesty maintained his imperturbable calm for a reason. The protagonist managed to spread his buffs to thousands of warriors. Finally, a task for this portal also appeared. This time they became part of King Lionheart's legion pursuing Duke Akasha. For the first time, the guest's purpose and mission completely coincided. The king ordered to explore the surrounding areas, as this was their first visit to the demon's domain. Meanwhile, the yacht spinner had already received intelligence data. The drone had recorded a large number of settlements where hostile creatures were likely living. The order was simple, to go to the nearest one immediately. However, getting inside was not so easy. The village headmen recognized Lionheart and instantly hid behind a high fence. The yacht spinner quickly cleared their path. Lion wanted to know why the elder was so frightened. Unexpectedly, the god Thetos turned to the king. He recognized this man as the former commander-in-chief of the imperial army who became a follower of the demon Varius. This news angered the king. All the inhabitants of the village were captured, after which interrogation began. It turned out that the elder received immortality in exchange for loyalty to the demon. For years they carried out all the orders and whims of these creatures. The man begged the king for mercy, claiming that a demon had tricked them. But Lion did not believe these excuses. He believed that there must be punishment for any sin. So until Tatar, the god of judgment, delivers the final verdict, all residents will be slaves for 50 years. By serving the gods, they will be able to at least partially purify their souls. This rule applied to everyone without exception, and the slaves carried out the king's orders without question. The headman was the one who put up the most fierce resistance, but even the goddess remained indifferent to his words. That's why when an army of demons approached the Lionheart Legion, a harsh decision was made. All 5,000 new slaves will come forward as human shields. Although these people did not want to follow orders, they themselves accepted the punishment. And now they had no freedom until 50 years of slavery had passed. The demons did not expect to see their former allies among their enemies. But the slaves, like madmen, rushed into battle without fear. The Lionheart Vanguard had a vitality boost of as much as 2,250%, so the human shield proved to be a fairly effective tactical move. King Lion, meanwhile, was already rushing forward, ruthlessly destroying the demons. The battle went easily, and the Pantheon Legion destroyed 3,200 enemies. In addition, prisoners were taken. Demons that Queen Beatrice planned to use to open even more demonic gates and continue the purge. The Japanese also wanted to take a few demons as a reward for participating in the battle. His Majesty sincerely appreciated their help but refused. He could not be sure that people would not succumb to the temptation of the dark force. However, after a brief exchange of glances with Beatrice, he still agreed to hand over the 3 creatures. Lion chose one demon, who immediately began praising Akasha. But just one blow from the king and the creature could only drool mindlessly. These actions had a clear goal: to break the demonic essence, to make them safe for humans, so that in the future these creatures could be used without risk. Meanwhile, the essence of Grand Duke Rizni was hiding in hiding. He never received a response to his request for reinforcements. The so-called allies believed that Akasha had no right to do so. The demon was outraged by the behavior of the Orc Khan, and his wounds healed extremely slowly. And all because of Lionheart. Akasha ordered them to come up with something, but it sounded as if the true owner of the body was trying to break out. The demon understood. He needed a new ideal body with exceptional potential. And such a person was Jeong So-yeon. Even during the party, His Majesty advised Miss Soen to take more care of her health and prepared a small gift for her. It was a special earring created by Queen Beatrice for all the cadets. Thanks to magic, the ornament could create a mental shield that protected the mind from demonic influence. After all, many demons had the ability to manipulate consciousness. Lion warned Jeong, if she lost, the evil being would take over her body, and then His Majesty would have to destroy her. But the girl was determined. This time she would completely trust the king. The plan was simple. Break through the portal. Everyone was supposed to follow only Lion. The fiery spear of light flew swiftly towards the demon's castle. The Grand Duke was pleased with the arrival of the guests. He could already taste Soen's flesh and blood. It was the only thing that could change the situation in his favor. Akasha ordered his subordinate to buy him 5 minutes, and it was at this moment that poor Soen was attacked. She was confused. The enemy forces were too powerful. He sought to possess her body to become even stronger. But suddenly another voice sounded in the girl's head and told her to run. For a moment, Joan felt that her father had helped her, at least for a few seconds. However, escape was impossible. Akasha, having taken possession of her body, began to laugh like a madman. He was overwhelmed with admiration for the perfection of the new medium. How incredibly talented this girl was. However, despite the euphoria, the demon lost the stability of his essence. He urgently needed to escape. But no one will allow him to do this. His Majesty has already found Akasha, and he was going to destroy the parasite immediately. A new shocking clash unfolded. The king and the demon fought almost on equal terms. It was not for nothing that Akasha was so eager to obtain this body. However, none of his attacks could penetrate Lionheart's perfect defense. The king only laughed louder. Before him was a true parasite, one who had collected all the sword techniques but had not perfected any of them. Lion realized more and more with each passing minute how pitiful this creature was. Akasha even stole the demon sword's weaknesses, but now justice was inevitable. Akasha tried to manipulate. He begged not to kill him because he was still in that girl's body. The demon could not understand who this monster was standing before him. But the answer was simple, not a monster, but King Lionheart. Lion destroyed the earring given to Beatrice, and at that very moment the Grand Duke of Miscellany unexpectedly found himself in some unknown space, bound in strong chains. Now the demon stood before the two gods of the pantheon. Byzantius was pleased. His avenger had kept his promise. And only at that moment did Akasha realize why the girl had allowed her body to be taken over. John knew from the very beginning that the moment of reckoning would come. She quietly asked for her body back. She was disgusted with being around this monster. However, Akasha was not going to give up. He screamed, begging Miss Soen to release him, convincing her that he could give her incredible destructive power. John silently approached, and it seemed to Demon that the girl had succumbed to a spell, but she simply punched him so hard that the demon flew away. The gods just smiled, proud of their little disciple. In response, Akasha began to insult her, assuring her that nothing would come of it and she would never achieve anything. But he had to pay dearly for these words. John finally drove the demon away, to a place from where he could never return. And then, after everything, what everyone had been waiting for began. Good news. Father John finally woke up. He couldn't believe he was seeing his daughter again. All the nightmares were behind them, and now they could just live. The man understood. He had to find a way to atone for all his sins. The first step is to accept faith in the Pantheon and offer help to the Lion King. However, Soen only blushed in embarrassment and replied that it was not necessary. She had already been chosen by God and even received power in exchange for the soul of an archdemon. But my father should have returned to the guild and become its new leader. The man was proud. His daughter had grown up and done so extremely quickly. Meanwhile, His Majesty was having a conversation with the First Sword of Korea. Lion intended to see the matter through to the end. Chan's body still retained the fighting skills of the previous archdemon carriers, and purifying his soul would not be easy. The elder sincerely thanked His Majesty. Lionheart saved the entire swordsman's family, and for the sake of this light, grandfather was ready for anything. The king advised him to go to the Pantheon, but Lion himself had one more important matter to attend to. Giant with the help of fortress traps. A few days after defeating Grand Duke Rizny, Hari and the new knights of the kingdom received their first mission. Their task was to try to catch the giants with the help of serfs. Of course, there were many doubts in the eyes of the students, but such a thing simply could not be based on the logic they used on Earth. And before the exam begins, His Majesty will demonstrate everything. And now I'll tell you what it all led to. Everything was based on Sir Grados's theory, which His Majesty received in paradise. For the Lion King, it was absolutely clear who would doubt it. They will be able to kill the giant if each serf inflicts 6 blows on him. The slaves quickly realized that they might simply be wanted to be killed. One of them seemed to have gone mad. He did not want to dance to Lion's tune. Additionally, all serfs were given a buff that made them 20% stronger. But this slave didn't even have time to use this power before he was simply crushed by the giant. He could not withstand the powerful blow, and his body remained on the ground. But one important detail emerged. The attack power increased sharply by 0.001%. His Majesty understood immediately. This 20% meant that the giants had absorbed the blood of 200,000 people. Sir Gratos had left them a real treasure, and now all that remained was to explain to the serfs what the whole point was. It was simple. They had to either die or kill the giant, and the giant was finally defeated. His Majesty was pleased with this sacred book, but something was bothering Harry. The girl said that the serfs were given a chance to atone for their sins, but was it worth so many deaths? Lion agreed because the gods liked such pure thoughts. However, he knew. Lionheart's retainers were not human. He understood that this did not convince Hari. The king ordered one of the slaves to come and tell about all his sins. The man confessed to killing his husband and raping his entire family. He dissected his victims' corpses and sacrificed living people. And he enjoyed all this because he was a servant of the demon. Even though these people could have lived righteously, they still did just that, so you shouldn't be soft on them. But there was only one reason to give these people a chance to atone for their sins. They are not demons. The next stage was as follows. Each knight was allocated 500 serfs, and the one who kills the giant with the fewest losses will become the captain of the knights. Jong So-yeon did the best, and she was appointed captain of the knights. Khan passed this exam the worst, but his faith in the god of Ariana was not quite suitable for such a task. However, he had a talent for sending slaves to hell, so he was allocated another 500 serfs. Lionheart's laughter echoed within the walls of the Pantheon for a long time. Let's return to the Pantheon. One issue worried His Majesty. The sapling he received from Gulnar had stopped growing. The goddess knew how difficult it was to raise the child of the forest sage. However, the problem was not the quality of the land, but the level of saturation of this world with divine power. His Majesty decided to use his own magic, and it immediately became clear that it wasn't a matter of lack of strength, but of its quality. Although Lion possessed the divine power of many gods, the growth of the shoot occurred solely by chance. The protagonist decided to return to paradise and meet with his friends to learn more, but the goddess asked him not to do this. It will not bring anything good for a living person to be in the world of the dead. Although Lion assured him that he would cope, if Zarea offered him a drink and Roxy wanted to duel, could the king refuse his precious memories? The first visit can be short, the second longer, and during the third you will want to stay there for a long time. Therefore, unless absolutely necessary, it is better not to return to paradise. His Majesty remembered the words of the Great Mother well. After this conversation, Lion met Beatrice. The queen noticed that he had been checking on the seedlings a lot lately. She wondered what kind of power the seedlings that Lion was so eager to grow possessed. In fact, everything was simple. The sages gave a sapling of a sacred tree which in the future would become the heart of the forest. This tree is necessary for the temple of the goddess Irmin, the patroness of forests and trees. When this virgin descends to earth, a deity will come with her, before whom no demon will stand. Beatrice pondered the fact that the power of the deity depended not only on the heavens, but also on the tree itself. Just like the lion's heart, the sacred tree produces its own divine power. And it is precisely because of his ability to purify evil that demons cannot even come close to him. The queen finally realized how important it was to grow this sapling, and she had one proven method. She prepared an entire procession. With the help of crystals and special spells, a powerful magic circle was created. Once the sapling was placed in the center, Her Majesty began the ritual. A portal of incredible beauty appeared right in front of her. For the first time, people saw the gate without color. It seemed either white or completely transparent. Lion immediately felt an incredible energy, and it was clear, you need to be very careful with this portal. Only a small group of knights, consisting of the best, will go there to investigate. The protagonist asked everyone to be as attentive and careful as possible. But as soon as the entrance was completed, something dangerous began. The gate anomaly has manifested itself again. The reason was not accidental. The portal is forbidden to let in a double. And that's exactly why Lion couldn't get in. The heroes found themselves in a new, still unknown place. Harry wanted to ask His Majesty where exactly they had been taken, but the king was not around. This immediately alarmed Beatrice. Lion's disappearance was not just disturbing, but critically dangerous. It seems His Majesty was unable to pass through the gate. The knights didn't understand what exactly had happened, so they planned to return and check if everything was okay. But suddenly a strange, cold voice came from the sky. Someone outside was clearly interested in the portal. The unknown person said he would not allow them to interfere with a mission that he himself considered too dangerous for outsiders. The knights warned the queen the gate was about to disappear. Beatrice quickly decided it was time to retreat. This place was already occupied by others, and the magic that reigned here was beyond her control. It seems they've gotten into something much more serious. Even Sir Spinar, usually hypersensitive to energy, couldn't pick up on anything. When the portal finally collapsed, the first panicked thoughts began to appear among the knights. Everyone understood that things were bad, and then it got even worse. In some inexplicable way, the heroes found themselves right in front of a giant army of monsters. The knights did not hesitate and immediately began to retreat, their horses at full speed. Beatrice's strength was almost exhausted. Almost all of her mana had gone into supporting the portal. Meanwhile, the number of enemies grew. Monsters appeared from all sides, surrounding them from all directions. The knights dreamed of only one thing, that His Majesty Lion was nearby now. Sir Spinner did his best using his entire arsenal to hold back the onslaught, but there were too many of them. The situation seemed hopeless, but at the last moment everything changed. Someone unknown destroyed the enemies in just a few moves. The fighters used techniques that belonged only to Lionheart. The heroes understood that they were not ordinary warriors. These were the Knights of the Holy Grail. They were led by the legendary warrior Gilion, a servant of the god Ultima. Thanks to their appearance, the Knights of the Pantheon found themselves in a safe place. The leader of the new squad wanted to know who was standing in front of him. He immediately felt that Sir Spinner was radiating the energy of the god of iron and fire himself. Beatrice explained that they had come from the borderlands and were delayed because of a demon. And now she needed to understand what had happened in this strange place. As it turned out, the situation was simple and at the same time dangerous. Sir Vulcanius had disappeared, and now the battles were fought right in the markets. King Lionheart fought against various races, gathering the remnants of his troops to form a unified army. And then Beatrice realized that they had entered Lion's world at the very moment when the wave of demons was at its peak. The knights realized that this place was too dangerous, and their mission still remained unknown. The very next day, they finally reached His Majesty's castle. A view opened up before them that amazed everyone. A real pantheon, which none of them had seen before. And yes, there really was a Lion King in this world. However, this was a completely different lion, the one they were not yet familiar with. Well, let's get back to the events inside the portal. All of this happened in the 60th year of His Majesty's reign. It was then that a demonic lord named Malleus first appeared. The empire, like the kingdom, was literally mired in chaos. Many of the Knights of the Holy Grail then departed into the afterlife. And there is no need to speak of the number of ordinary people who died. A few years later, winter began, when the second invasion of demons took place. It was the 66th year. The empire fell. The elven forest burned to the ground, the dwarven mountains turned into ruins, and the southern celestial kingdom collapsed under the pressure of the forces of darkness. The entire territory of the kingdom suffered a catastrophe. 90% of the land was destroyed. But despite everything, His Majesty was not going to give up, and it was during this period that our Knights of the Pantheon arrived at him. An important question arose before them. What to do next? Beatrice remembered Sir Gillenorm's words. The king would be returning from battle very soon, and by then they had to complete their first task, to find the wise men of the forest and learn from them about the sprouts of Gunler. Sir Spinner took charge of gathering information and developing the plan. Meanwhile, Hari was advised to join the work with the other knights. But things didn't go according to plan. She was quickly chased away because she turned out to be a priestess. So the girl decided to go to the temple that stood at the very top of the mountain, and the poor thing had no idea what a difficult climb awaited her. But suddenly an elegant carriage stopped next to her. Inside sat a wondrous beauty. Her radiance felt almost as much as that of the king himself. The girl turned to Hari. That's how she ended up in a carriage that took her straight to the temple. This stranger was called Anyak. She was a servant of the goddess Ariana. Their conversation was light and warm, and soon the girls were already going up to the temple. Before them was a real pantheon, a place about which legends were spread. And what was most surprising was that Anyak turned out to be a great saint. Hari was so shocked that she almost fell to her knees, begging for forgiveness. However, Anyak was not offended. She had only one request for her new friend. Together they went to the Abbess Isabella to prepare for the great consecration in honor of His Majesty, who was just returning in victory. Hari already guessed that the meeting with King Lion was closer than it seemed. And then the news came. King Lionheart had arrived. As soon as the gate opened, Hari froze. She didn't recognize him. Before her was a completely different lion, not so joyful and friendly, but rather wild, full of unspeakable fear. His Majesty literally radiated death as sticky as pitch. And it wasn't just power, it was his nature, for he was the apostle of death. Without going into details, let's just say that the king immediately headed to a special hall. Everything was ready there for the dedication ceremony. The protagonist from the past plunged into the font. He needed to wash away his suffering and blood. And suddenly the silence of the hall was shattered by thunder. Karina, the commander of the Northern Army, entered. But she was also the legitimate Duchess of the Grand Duchy, and most importantly, the daughter of the King of Lyon himself. Lion could not understand why Karina suddenly appeared. His daughter wasn't used to taking unnecessary steps, so there was clearly a good reason for this appearance. And she didn't delay for long. She simply stated head-on that the Northern Army was withdrawing from the ranks of the Allied forces. The king, of course, refused. His Majesty could not even entertain the thought of such a thing. The North was the backbone of the entire alliance, its support. But Karina was not going to back down. The capital lay in ruins. The continent was falling apart, and the enemy had a 10 million-strong army of monsters and demons. And every day there were more of them. She looked her father in the eyes and asked simply, "Was there even one chance left to win?" Lion didn't answer directly. He just asked coldly, "What's her real problem?" Karina clenched her fists. She couldn't erase the death of her loved ones from her memory. And even if she is unable to destroy all the demons, she must take revenge. The king was a little confused. Did his daughter really blame him for this? Does she really think he made a mistake by destroying hordes of demons instead of defending the Grand Duchy? But everything was different. He fulfilled his duty as a monarch. Karina acted not as a strategist, but as a daughter who had lost everything. She lifted her collar and showed the proof, the clear, burning sign of the agreement. Lion was speechless. His own daughter is a holy grail knight of the god of darkness and vengeance, Byzantius. The entire army of the North swore allegiance to this force. He didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal or her calm gaze. His Majesty didn't want to hear anything more. He ordered Karina to leave the Pantheon. But it was clear to him that it was too late. The choice had been made, the road back was closed. Karina was lost. The great feast has already begun. The Purification ritual has once again focused attention on the Lionheart. But suddenly the king looked around and noticed a strange stranger whom he had not seen before. His voice broke the silence. "Who is she?" But there was still no answer. At this same time, other Knights of the Holy Grail were operating throughout the Pantheon. Sir Spinner arranged a secret observation. One of the workshops caught his attention. That's how he ended up in the forge. As soon as he crossed the threshold, the blacksmith immediately felt a strange presence. It seemed that now he would simply be wiped off the face of the earth. But Spinner showed in time what he was capable of, and this forced the blacksmith to change his anger to interest. This stern man recognized Spinner as not just a spy, but a true servant of the gods. And the knight himself finally understood who was in front of him, the Knight of the Grail, the master of iron and anvil, Antok himself. His fame went before him. Meanwhile, Hari returned to the cadet barracks. Everyone was on their feet. Everyone had received some important news that could affect the future. Divine energy literally pierced space. It was too powerful to ignore. And then there was silence. heavy, ominous. It seemed as if the very air had frozen. A giant tree suddenly threw their tent into the sky, and at that moment, swords were pointed at the cadets. Everything happened in a flash. Roxley, the head magistrate of the kingdom, appeared before them. His eyes were burning, and it was he who pronounced the sentence, "All sinners must receive punishment."